Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us for this session. We now begin the 15th plenary session of the International Forum on Sustainable Asia and the Pacific, ISAP 2023. I will be serving as a facilitator. My name is Tomoko Kawakita of IGES, Institute for Global Environmental Studies. Today's forum will be held in a hybrid format with Pacifico Yokohama as a venue and online via Zoom. Simultaneous Japanese and English interpretation will be provided. For those of you attending from the venue, please set your receiver on channel 1 for Japanese and channel 2 for English. If you are attending online, please click the interpreter button on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen to select the language of your choice, either Japanese or English. May we also remind you, only with the permission of the speakers, the presentation materials of the session speakers will be posted onto the website. Following conclusion of the session, we will now begin the opening session.
To begin, we would like to show you the video message from Minister of the Environment, Ito Shintaro. I am Ito Shintaro, Minister of the Environment, and I would like to welcome you to the International Forum on Sustainable Asia and the Pacific. I would like to extend my warmest congratulations to the organizer, IGES, led by President Takeuchi Kazuhiko, and to all the supporting organizations on this grand opening of the 15th Forum. I have just recently participated in COP28 held in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. At the COP, the Global Stocktake, which assesses the progress of climate change measures worldwide under the Paris Agreement, was compiled for the first time, and the momentum to strengthen climate change measures in each country and region was further enhanced. In addition, the so-called Loss and Damage Fund was also agreed upon at the beginning of the meeting, and significant progress was made. In addition, 14 Japanese companies exhibited their advanced decarbonization technologies at the Japan Pavilion, organized by the Japanese government, and seminars were held on various topics, including the Paris Agreement Article 6 Implementation Partnership. Japan has long been a leader in the negotiations for the formulation of the rules for Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Through Joint Crediting Mechanism, JCM, Japan has implemented more than 240 emission reduction projects, mainly in the Asian region, and the number of partner countries has now expanded to 28. These efforts are linked to the Asian zero-emission community concept being promoted by the Japanese government. Japan will leverage its experience and know-how so as to contribute further to global emission reductions through capacity building, training, and support for project formulation so that countries, regions can actively utilize the JCM and other Article 6 mechanisms. IGES, which has a wealth of knowledge in this field, is also expected to collaborate in the future cooperation of the Paris Agreement Article 6 Implementation Partnership as a key member. I understand ISAP 2023's theme is Accelerating Sustainability Transitions in Asia and the Pacific, the transformative potential of integration, inclusion, and localization. Ensuring sustainable and inclusive economic growth and development is a common challenge for the entire world, as stated at the Leaders' Communique of the G7 Hiroshima Summit. The Environment Ministry is currently working on the 6th Environmental Basic Plan, where the integrated improvement of the environment, economy, and society will be sought, and local SDGs will be promoted as an important pillar of the plan. We will further work out the details going forward. Once again, I would like to conclude by expressing my hope that today's forum will be a fruitful and productive one for everyone involved. Thank you.
Next, the guest of honor, Mr. Koitabashi Satoshi, Vice Governor of Kanagawa Prefecture, will present his greetings. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Koitabashi Satoshi, Vice Governor of Kanagawa Prefecture. I express my heartfelt pleasure upon the opening of the 15th ISAP International Forum for Sustainable Asia and the Pacific. The organizer, the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, IGES, since its inception, has been active in the Asia-Pacific region, engaging in practical policy research for the realization of sustainable development. The wealth of knowledge and research findings have contributed to the formation of policies in our prefecture through collaborative efforts. In fiscal 2021, the prefectural government and IGES embarked upon a joint research which has generated Kanagawa Decarbonization Vision 2050 that presents a vision for the future and options for actions that residents, businesses, governments, and other entities can take now in order to realize a decarbonized society in 2050. I wish to take this opportunity to once again express my respect and appreciation for the tremendous efforts in driving global and local behavioral change. Today's forum is held under the theme of accelerating sustainability transition in Asia and the Pacific, the transformative potential of integration, inclusion, and localization. I'm aware discussions will proceed on ways we can contribute to accelerating transition to a sustainable society. Climate change impacts air and water temperature, which in turn drives changes in forest vegetation and marine and terrestrial life. The progression of climate change will trigger loss of diversity. Measures to combat climate change is crucial for preservation of biodiversity. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide sequestration by trees and seaweed and thermal insulation properties of greenery are valid steps to preserving the natural ecosystem. If we are to address these interrelated issues, we recognize the importance of taking concurrent steps on a global scale. Regarding climate change, this month in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, the 28th Conference of the Parties, COP28, to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was held, and an agreement was reached to expand the introduction of renewable energy. In November of 2019, ahead of the rest of the country, Kanagawa Prefecture announced the commitment to achieve a decarbonized society by 2050, and in February of this year, Kanagawa announced a commitment to raise the greenhouse gas emissions reduction target for fiscal 2030 from 46% to 50% below the fiscal 2013 level. In addition, this fiscal year, the Kanagawa Prefecture Global Warming Prevention Plan is undergoing a comprehensive revision, which urges the entire nation and Kanagawa Prefecture to join hands in achieving a decarbonized society by thoroughly implementing energy conservation measures, expanding the use and introduction of renewable energy, and working on the use of common sinks. A new national biodiversity strategy has been drawn by the central government, which strives to achieve a nature-positive economy, OECM 30 by 30, NBS, and other approaches. In line with this effort, we are also revising the Kanagawa Biodiversity Plan. Of these approaches, OECM 30 by 30, nature-based solutions, and other areas related to the conservation of ecosystems have been rolled out in Kanagawa in the Kanagawa Green Trust and other measures to conserve and restore the water source environment that are currently being undertaken. However, for themes that explore ways to improve the socio-economic system, such as realization of a nature-positive economy, it is essential to deepen discussions toward localization at forums such as this, the ISAP 2023. In promoting measures, the prefecture is working to realize a Kanagawa for vibrant lives, embodied in the keywords vibrant inochi, inochi meaning life. We cannot create a society where no one is overcome by sickness. However, we can create a society where everyone can smile and shine, even in old age. A society where people support each other, where laughter abounds, and where each individual's life shines brightly. And this is the essence of a vibrant inochi that we are striving for. To ensure our lives shine, it is important to consider not only medical care, but also food, energy, education, and a sustainable global environment that supports them, as well as the integration of all of these elements. Each individual's life will shine brightly only when everything is connected and various measures are linked together. Kanagawa Prefecture will continue our efforts to realize a sustainable global environment for future generations, aiming to be a region where life shines brightly. We hope that participants in this forum will take this opportunity to further strengthen the mutual network and to engage in active discussions towards the conservation of the global environment. We also look forward to receiving your comments on the integrated approach to the realization of a decarbonized society and the preservation of biodiversity in our prefecture. In conclusion, I would like to conclude my greetings by wishing for the continued development of IJUS and the best of health and success to all of the participants who have joined us today. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Vice Governor Koitabashi. And now we'd like to call upon IJUS President Takeuchi Kazuhiko to deliver his welcome remarks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As introduced, I am Takeuchi, President of ISAP. On behalf of the organizer, allow me to deliver my welcome remarks. I would like to welcome you all to the 15th International Forum for Sustainable Asia and the Pacific, ISAP 2023. I would like to thank Environment Minister Ito Shintaro for his video message, as well as Vice Governor Koitabashi Satoshi, who has just taken the stage. I would like to express my gratitude to keynote speaker Hans Joachim Schunfuber, Director Emeritus of Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and new Director General of the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, ISAP, and the speakers of the two plenary sessions. UN Undersecretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Amida Saisia, Ali Shaibalina, Overseas Environmental Cooperation Center President, Takemoto Kazuhiko, Akita International University President, Monte Kasem, Japan Climate Leaders Partnership Co-Chair and Executive Manager, ESG Planning and Promotion Department, Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Bank, Miyake Kaori, and IJS Trustee and the University of Tokyo Institute for Future Initiatives Professor, Takamura Yukari. On behalf of IJS, I would also like to thank all the participants attending in person at Yokohama and those joining us online from Japan and overseas. On behalf of IJS, once again, I would like to thank you all. ISAP2023 is being supported by the Ministry of the Environment Japan, Kanagawa Prefectural Government, Hyogo Prefectural Government, City of Yokohama, City of Kitakyushu, Kawasaki City, National Institute for Environmental Studies, Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, Environmental Restoration and Conservation Agency, ERCA, ICLEI Japan Office, Global Environmental Action Gear. We are fortunate to have the support from the central government, local governments, and also organizations engaged in environmental activities. This year's ISAP, with the support of all these organizations participants, is being successfully held. Thank you. This year's ISAP is themed Accelerating Sustainability as Transitions in Asia and the Pacific, the Transformative Potential of Integration, Inclusion, and Localization. Under this theme, we would like to take up integrated, inclusive initiatives to address sustainability in the Asia-Pacific, promote social transformation by implementing solutions aligned to the diverse backgrounds of countries and regions of Asia and the Pacific, and discuss possibilities to accelerate transition to a sustainable society. At the plenary one, which I will moderate, panelists will share what they view as the top priorities required for progress on climate change, biodiversity, circular economy, and the SDGs more broadly, and highlight how their priorities can pave the way for more lasting improvements to socio-economic systems and a sustainable future. Plenary 2 will feature a dialogue between IJS research leaders on climate change, biodiversity loss, challenges in mainstreaming circular economy, and the SDGs more broadly, and possible solutions. The 28th Conference of the Parties, COP28, to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, was recently held in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, which I also attended. At COP28, there was an agreement to start operation of the Climate Change-Induced Loss and Damage Fund. I could not help but wish that my long and good friend, Dr. Salim Haq, who worked on this issue for many years and unfortunately passed away this year, were still with us. Also, for the first time, the global stocktake was held to assess progress in combating climate change worldwide. The outcome document, adopted by extending the session by 1 day, clearly stated the direction to accelerate the shift away from fossil fuels. Later, in this ISAP, IGES research staff who attended COP28 will hold a COP28 flash seminar at the parallel session, which I hope you will join. I also took the opportunity of this COP28 to sign a memorandum of cooperation with the Secretariat of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, as well as to hold bi- and multilateral meetings with several UN agencies and research institutions. I also attended a number of side events. And also at the Sapporo G7 Energy and Environmental Ministers meeting, the Article 6 partner center, we call it Article 6 Center in Japan. And I just served as the secretariat, and especially with international institutions, UNFCCC and the World Bank, have been carrying out various activities so as to engage in capacity building related to Article 6. And at COP28, we also organized a side event, this Paris Agreement, Article 6, Implementation Partnership. And the package that we announced was welcomed. And as Minister Ito mentioned, the center, even prior to the establishment of the center, IGES has been long contributing toward this end, and we are grateful to the minister for his very kind words. We are also working hard and happy to be able to make contribution to making an impact. Climate change, loss of biodiversity, and pollution. And these are multi-crises which we are currently facing in 2020. In 2019, UNDESA and UNFCCC started the synergy initiative addressing both the SDGs and climate change, and we have also participated in gaining momentum. IGES is deeply engaged in such activities, and at Dubai, the SDGs Pavilion and Japan Pavilion, we held side events. Let me add something to this. Well, at the September SDG Summit, I, as a member, took part in the Climate Change and SDGs Synergy Expert Group meeting. And as a UN institution, for the first time, a global synergy report was published. And next year, in 2024, the Summit of the Future will be held. And at that summit and other opportunities, we are planning to publish the second report. Next March, we at IGES in Hayama, we were holding an expert meeting together with the Ministry of the Environment of Japan. Furthermore, we will also publish an Asia and the Pacific version of the report. We are working on this, and we would like to play an active role in the publication of this report as well. A few Our future generations will be affected by our actions towards a sustainable society. In the closing session, we will reflect on the meeting with youth representatives and ask them to create a vision for their future 50 years from now. We hope to continue to support them and move together with them. This year, ISAP is hosting a poster session for the first time. In addition to the topics covered in this meeting, IGES is conducting a variety of research and activities, and our researchers in charge are waiting for you in front of the posters. Please feel free to talk to the poster presenters. In addition, junior high school and senior high school students who are interested in biology and science are attending the poster session, so please try to look at their research as well. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for your attendance, and on this note, I would like to conclude my welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With this, we will conclude the opening session. We will set the stage for the following session. We ask for your patience. Thank you very much for your kind attention. We would like to now begin the plenary session 1. Accelerating sustainability transitions, what is needed now and in the future. First of all, we would like to introduce the Director Emeritus of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and now the new Director of the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IIASA. We have Professor Hans-Joachim Schoeffer.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to provide a keynote for your important forum on the Asia and the Pacific, so ISAP2023. The overall theme, as you can see, is accelerating the sustainability transition, which is, of course, the theme of your forum here. And I will try to address a few very urgent things regarding the global environment and the challenges ahead of us. Now, let me remind you, more than 50 years ago, the Club of Rome published, or actually, this was a report for the Club of Rome. It was published by Donella Meadows and others. It was the famous, the legendary report, The Limits to Growth. And if you look on the right-hand side, this is one of the collapse scenarios. And you see it was all driven by the depletion of resources. Population was growing and it was collapsing after the depletion of the resources. And you see a fairly small hump in between, that is the pollution. It was just a byproduct, if you like, of the industrial development. And of course it would go down after the collapse of the major industries and the value production systems. Now today, this tiny hump is actually dominating the whole crisis. We still have resources like oil and in particular coal for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. But the so-called external effects are really now jeopardizing our civilization. So today we talk about planetary boundaries which may be transgressed, the planetary boundaries which may be transgressed if we keep on destroying ecosystems, and in particular if we churn out CO2, methane and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So I was part of the first assessment of the planetary boundaries, which you see here on the left-hand side. The first author was Johan Rockström, but paper published in Nature 2009 has become quite famous now. There's an update which was done this year, published in Science Advances. And on the left-hand side, you see back in 2009, we thought that we have already transgressed 3 planetary boundaries. Now we have 9 of them, and the most important one is, besides the depletion of the biosphere, the destruction of species, is climate change, of course. So why is climate change a risk, a threat? There have been many debates about it. I have myself introduced in the early 2000s, actually in 2001, during a lecture I gave at Oxford University, the concept of the so-called tipping elements in the Earth system. These are big, quintessential elements of our planetary environment, which may be changed in character or even destroyed if we transgress certain temperature limits. So you see here the big ice sheets, big ecosystems like the Amazon rainforest, circulation patterns in the atmosphere as well as in the oceans like the thermoline circulation in the North Atlantic and so on. And if we now turn up the heat, 1 degree warming, 1.5, 2, 2.5, like dominoes, so to speak, these elements are tipped into a new state, maybe into destruction. There's an update again. This was done in 2008. Now, just last year, there was an update on it, and I will not go through the map. The only thing you should know, if you identify the orange circles, and you can see this, the low latitude coral reefs, for example, belong to that. This means even below 2 degrees, there may be the collapse or the tipping of this vital element of the global environment. And you will see the Greenland ice sheet and a few other quintessential elements of the global environment here. Even worse is the fact that there are interactions. So, for example, if Greenland ice sheet melts down, the meltwater will eventually shut down the thermoline circulation, also known as the Gulf Stream system in the Atlantic. This has a major impact on the Amazon rainforest. And we just recently discovered, which was mind-boggling in a way, that there is a teleconnection between the Amazon rainforest and the snow cover on the Tibetan plateau. This interaction goes along 15,000 kilometers between, actually across 3 continents here. So it means if we destroy the Amazon rainforest, it would ultimately mean that the snow cover would be changed on the Tibetan plateau. And the Tibetan plateau is absolutely important for Asia, of course, because most or many of the big rivers in Eastern Asia and Southeast Asia come from the Tibetan plateau here. So this is what we have to avoid. And the Paris Agreement, we currently have the COP28 in Dubai. This was in 2015, COP21. The Paris Agreement is defining and addressing the right climate targets, namely keep global warming well below 2 degrees, but do everything as an aspiration to even keep global warming limited to 1.5 degrees here. Unfortunately, we will soon pass this red line, and I will elaborate a little bit on this. So, for example, here you see the global mean temperature development since 1880, since we have sort of instrumental records. And you see it's going up and down more or less, but the whole thing is accelerating around 1980. And now we are moving towards 1.3, 1.4 degree. Last year, we still had global warming limited to 1.2 degrees. But this year is changing everything in a way. So what you see here is from a public website of the University of Maine called the Climate Reanalyzer. You see on a daily basis global mean temperature 2 meters above the ground. You can also look at ocean surface temperature. You can look at the extension of Arctic and Antarctic sea ice. And the black line is actually the development during this year. So we have almost completed a full annual cycle here. And you see this is way above everything we have measured before. So this year is absolutely exceptional. And 2 days during this year, very recently on the 17th of November and on the 3rd of December, global mean temperature change was already 2 degrees, more or less. So on that day, during these days, we did not only breach the 1.5 degrees line, but even the 2 degrees line. Now, this is exceptional in a sense. It only happened for a few days. And in the global average, in the annual average, it will be probably very close to 1.5 degrees. But it means the year 2023 will probably already scratch the more ambitious line of the Paris Agreement, namely 1.5 degrees. And we are heading towards the 2 degrees now. This is sea surface temperature, also well above, in a very disturbing way, on all previous measurements, with all the reverberations and consequences of that. So here is also recently published from the United Nations, from UNEP, the emissions gap report. So how do we have to reduce emissions in order to hold the Paris lines? And you see on the left-hand side, the blue range of emissions, that means bending down the emissions between now and 2035. The blue range would be in line with the 2 degrees target, while the green range, bending down even more vigorously, would be in line with the 1.5 range. But you see the dark blue line above is where we're heading right now with the current policies. So we are far above anything that would ensure that we stay within the Paris range. So here is my master or key slide, if you like. So on the horizontal axis, you see the timeline. So it's between 1900 and 2200. On a vertical axis, delta global mean temperature, that is the climate anomaly since the industrial age started. You see the 1.5 degrees line, the 2 degrees line. Currently, that means till the year 2022, as I said, this year will breach all the previous records. We have arrived at 1.2 degrees, and under business as usual, that means with the policies measures that are already agreed upon, we will go probably even beyond 3 degrees warming. By the end of this century, it would be between 2.4 and 2.9 degrees centigrade. So we will leave, we will exit the Paris range under these scenarios. So what is the alternative, and what is the big issue now for climate change management? We should try to keep this excursion into forbidden land as flat and as short as possible, and then bend the curve down again, hopefully towards 1 degree warming, because we think, the majority of the scientific community thinks, this is more or less compatible with our civilization, technical civilization supporting 6, 8, or 10 billion people. This is called overshoot. In a way, overshoot and return to a compatible level of global warming. This can only be achieved through so-called negative emissions. We have to clean up the atmosphere from historical emissions. Of course, we have to make our industry, our economy climate neutral, in a sense, no emissions anymore of greenhouse gas emissions, or close to zero. But this will not do the job alone. We will also have to proactively remove carbon from the atmosphere. So this is part of the great 21st century transformation, if you like, which is the theme, of course, in the Asia-Pacific region of your forum. How can we transform, how can we transition from a stupid, divisive, non-inclusive linear petro-economy, precisely the thing that is debated in Dubai right now, to a smart, intelligent, inclusive, circular bioeconomy. That's the big challenge. And this is the biggest revolution of all in the history of our civilization. So actually, this gentleman here, formerly the Prince of Wales, now King Charles III, whom I know well, has written a visionary book about this harmony with nature. And this means we have to base our future creation of wealth on nature, more or less, the processes, the resources of nature. And I'm part, actually, of one of the trustees of the so-called Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, a charity which was founded by King Charles III. It's all about this. Now, how can we move forward? Well, we have the bio-geophysical tipping points, but we also have social tipping dynamics which can help us to win the race against the physical tipping, so to speak. And I give you just one example. There was a nice paper about the so-called solar tipping point or solar energy transition. It just shows you what will be the cheapest source of power in the future. And on the right-hand side, you see the chart. As long as it is blue, for example, it's wind energy offshore or onshore. The cheapest in 2020 in many countries of the world. But if you go to 2027, for example, you see it's all red, almost all red. It's all about solar energy. And finally, in 2030, the cheapest source of power will be photovoltaics, except for very few countries in Scandinavia, for example. So this was a tipping point when in Germany in the year 2000, a law was passed, the so-called feed-in tariff for solar energy, also wind energy, and that has changed the world of energy. But what is lacking so far in most sustainability assessment is what I sometimes also call the dark side of the sustainability moon. It's the material flows. So, you know, all the materials in construction sector, in infrastructure, in consumption, of course, and so on, the material metabolism of the Anthroposphere. And in this context, I have started an initiative in the year 2019, 100 years after the famous Bauhaus was founded in Weimar in Germany, which revolutionized the architecture, urban development all over the planet, actually. And I have asked and found a number of partners and colleagues for a 21st century new Bauhaus initiative. As now the new European Bauhaus, which was proposed by Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, and I have myself, together with friends and partners, founded Bauhaus Earth. It's all about the new Bauhaus movement. And why? Because the built environment is so important, because the built environment is key to sustainability in the material sphere, but it is key to sustainability across all quarters of our planet. And what we can do, I showed you this master slide about bending the curve back, so removing carbon from the atmosphere, and the recipe for that is reforesting the planet, retimbering the city. That means we have to reforest degraded land, about a billion hectares of degraded land on this planet in order to suck up carbon from the atmosphere. But in order to store it safely, we should do it by a regenerative architecture where we use timber, where we should use bamboo and other organic materials. So the elephant in the sustainability room, as I said, the built environment. So 40% of the global greenhouse gas emissions come from erecting, operating, and demolishing buildings, for example. So we did a paper recently in Nature Sustainability called Buildings as a Global Carbon Sink, the biggest of all possible carbon sinks operated by humankind would be the built environment, actually. So you switch from concrete and steel, which is accompanied, the production of them is accompanied with tremendous greenhouse gas emissions. You switch to timber and bamboo, which means you have a net removal, a negative emission, a net removal of carbon from the atmosphere. That's the big idea about it. And this would be the technical scheme, so to speak. Because of our burning of fossil fuels, we have tremendous amount of carbon in the atmosphere, which is food for trees, for example. So you have the CO2 fertilization effect. If you remove through photosynthesis the carbon again, and you have forest, if you well sustain this forest, you do logging, but replant, and you use the timber in order to transform cities actually in constructed forests, if you like, and if you recycle the timber from these buildings, and of course you replant, as I said before, you create something like a forestry construction pump. And if you operate it 3, 4, 5 times over the next 2 centuries, you can actually clean up the atmosphere. And all you need to do, and this is irony, of course, all you need to do is add and support about 500 billion trees. And you have to build about 2 billion homes from harvested biomass, in particular from timber and bamboo, the nature-based solution. So let me end with referring to a few of the keywords in your concept. So one thing was inclusion here and integration. So the inclusion thing is really interesting. So I'll switch to the next slide. How did the emissions come about, the historical emissions? And actually, if you include not only what countries have done on their territory, the US, for example, China, Russia, Germany, but you include also the emissions from controlled territories on a per capita basis now. The Netherlands are the biggest polluter of all times, actually. Why? Because of the deforestation we brought about in Indonesia, in Sumatra, in Java, on Borneo, and so on. It's really amazing. So something what will happen is that to make up for historical emissions, but also for the predicaments sort of now created for small island states, for example, there's a historical agreement between Australia and Tuvalu to actually open Australia for the residents of Tuvalu if their country is destroyed by sea level rise. And finally, on localization, I talked about integration in the beginning, where these land use and construction, you bring them together to have this forestry construction pump. I talked about inclusion. How do you make up also for historical emissions, but how do you help countries jeopardized by global warming now? Finally, localization. And localization is really about settlements, about where you live, how you live, and so on. In the 1990s and the early 2000s, there was this idea of star architecture, and where just for the super rich, spectacular buildings were constructed, but the majority of people live like this. This is an aerial view of Cairo, 20 million people, no green space, no functioning water, water supply and things like that. And this followed what we had before. It was vernacular architecture, where in each region, for the climate and for the territory, the right architecture was developed. And we have to do it now. We have to do it while the climate is changing. A tremendous challenge now. So finally, I'm now Director General of IASA as of the 1st of December this year, just a few days ago. What are the crucial IASA themes? And I hope we can have a very close collaboration on this with the Asia-Pacific region, with the member states of IASA. So the first one is, as I said, climate overshoot management, the transition to a regenerative economy. The transformation of the built environment will be absolutely key in this context. And when two themes, which I haven't mentioned so far, in a multipolar world where you do not just have two superpowers, as was the case in 1972 when IASA was established, new ways of systems analysis, of science diplomacy, and multilateral negotiations have to be invented. That will be one of the foci of IASA in the future. And finally, as much as climate change is changing the world, it is digitalization, the advent of quantum computing, of artificial intelligence, and in 10 or 20 years, artificial superintelligence probably. If we harness these powers, they can help us to overcome the climate and the environmental crisis, the sustainability crisis. But this can also go terribly wrong. The perfect storm would happen if artificial intelligence becomes more or less, something that spins out of control, as does the climate, and then it would be the end of our civilization, not only in the Asia-Pacific region, all over the planet. So thanks for your attention, and I wish you the best luck and the best success for your forum. Thank you.
続きまして、パネルディスカッションに移らせ
We would now like to enter into the panel discussion. First of all, I would like to introduce the speakers who will join us for the plenary session, panel session.
事務次長、国連アジア太平洋経済社会委員会事務局長、
First of all, we are joined by
アリシャバナ様、
the Undersecretary General of the United Nations Executive Secretary,
ご覧となります。
Madam Armida Salcia Al-Jabana,
環境協力センター
who will
理事長、竹内
speak over a video. And we have with us the president of OECC Japan,
理事長、
Mr. Takemoto Kazuhiko, and president of Akita International University, Mr. Kasim
リーダーズパートナー
Monte, and also co-chair of JCOP, Executive Manager, ESG Planning and Promotion Department, Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Bank Limited,
フェロー役員、
and also a fellow. We have with us Ms. Miyake Kaori,
理事長
and IJUST president.
でございます。
Serving as a moderator is Mr. Takeuchi Kazuhiko.
アイジス理事長、
Now I would like to turn over to
それでは
President of IJUST, Takeuchi Kazuhiko.
San and Miyake-san for attend this very important discussion. And I cannot see the Professor Montecasimo. Are you there? Not there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm
Okay,
here.
okay.
I'm here.
Very nice to see you.
Lovely to see
First,
you.
we are having a video message from Armida-san from SCAP. So please look at this video.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, I'm very pleased to deliver remarks for this important forum on sustainability transitions in Asia and the Pacific. Allow me to start by emphasizing that sustainability transitions are a matter of survival. Highly resource-intensive growth model, and rapid utilization accounts for much of these regions' contribution of over 63% of global material consumption and over half of global greenhouse gas emissions. The region is warming faster than the global average and is home to 8 out of the 10 countries that are most vulnerable to natural disasters. Here, poverty, food insecurity, inequality, and vulnerability persist. Those most affected bear an unfair share of climate impacts. However, we are all likely to be impacted in one way or another, as environmental degradation is estimated to create risk for more than 60% of Asia-Pacific's GDP. History provides us with important insight into the region's unique advantages in this slide for sustainable growth. The shared mission, innovation, and common goals foster the growth of the most dynamic economies in the world, but this is not the only contribution. The universal values of peace and solidarity and the knowledge system of the region's diverse culture have spread across the globe. This region's ability to turn crisis into opportunity has been an intangible and priceless asset for planetary evolution. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this perspective on history tells us that our region can lead the way. It's important to emphasize that our collective work on transformative dynamics, integration, inclusion, and localization must be grounded in the region's innovation capacity, diversity, as well as rich local knowledge. We take the challenge of sustainability transitions seriously. Our teams in Almaty, Bangkok, Beijing, Incheon, New Delhi, Suva, and Tokyo support governments and partners in driving transformations through programs in energy, transportation, financing for development, social transformation and protection system, disaster risk reduction, agriculture mechanization, ICT development, statistical system development, among many others. We are also working to reinvigorate regional cooperation for sustainability transformation with a new program on air pollution, or the so-called RAPAP, which was recently established and already delivering. We are now working to establish a regional platform for ocean-based climate action. This platform will transform the way that governments work together, and we welcome partners' contribution. New knowledge and tools are needed to analyze risk and to strengthen transformative strategies. ESCAP has been a frontrunner in applying systems thinking to policy development and in the analysis of the region's nationally determined contributions. Our climate risk analysis and decision support tool includes a new multidimensional risk assessment framework for the system. It provides insight to help countries fine-tune their development strategies. We also provide advice and technical assistance for the localization of the SDGs. Our guidance on voluntary local reviews, or VLRs, translate the global goals into relevant, actionable, and attainable priorities at the local level. These local reviews build vital capacity to learn, respond, innovate, as well as mobilize bottom-up action and new resources. The Asia-Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development catalyzes peer learning in support of localized action, and we are privileged to work with ASEAN governments to operationalize the right to a healthier environment in support of the SDGs. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we recognize the power of integration, inclusion, and localization, I would like to propose quote-unquote anticipation as a fourth leverage point for sustainability transition in this time of polycrisis and uncertainty. We are harnessing participatory foresight to grapple with challenges ranging from social protection to the environmental future of the region. Such foresight exercises reveal steps for change at the systemic level needed to deliver a preferred future for Asia-Pacific region. In conclusion, I invite you all to join us on our mission for sustainability transition. I wish you a fruitful discussion and forum. Thank you very much.
Aruna-san, thank you very much for your kind message. Very recently, I had a chance to see her in Dubai during the COP28, and she asked me to convey her best regard to all the participants at ISAP. So I would like to ask first Dr. Takemoto about your reflection on based on the two previous presentations.
Thank you, Professor Takeuchi. I have heard two very insightful remarks and keynote speech. First, on the John Hoover's the keynote speech, a lot of insightful aspect to raise, but I would like to focus on the only 2 points from his message. First, that is how we can manage the climate overshooting of the GHG emissions in the constructive manner. And he also touched on his own commitment to address that point. However, it is very, very much the challenging issues. The many people around the world, we have to work together. In this regard, the global research institutions, including EASA as well as IGES, which you are taking the lead. I think all over the world, we have worked together to share these priority areas. I am fully involved in the ESR activities, and I wish to contribute to their activity at the same time. And we are going to bridge our, for instance, IGES is based in Japan, and also the very good network. Obviously, through the global network, as well as mainly the very good at the connection with Asian region. That is the one point, and the other aspect is what he has raised is cities or urban activities. City is playing a very important role in addressing not only the addressing, but also the causing some issues, climate emissions, something like that. At the same time, there are a lot of source to the carbon sink as well. That two areas I am very much interested in focusing on. If possible, I would like to touch on the Alameda point. Only one point I wish to share with you. The sustainability transition is matter of survival. That is the very key message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Takemoto. And I also like to congratulate you to become the chair of the board of EASA. And now I would like to ask Professor Kasim on your view reflected the two presentations. Particularly, I'm interested in, because you are specializing in urban planning, what Dr. Hoover mentioned about the importance of the city and built environment in order to absorb the CO2 emissions.
Thank you very much, Takemoto Sensei, and Ms. Ali Jabana, for your insightful contributions to this panel. And thank you, Sensei, as always, for having this wonderful ability to bring so many different people together to address these very important existential threats to humanity. I'm extremely happy to be here. I'm sorry I'm too far away from you, but nevertheless, the things that struck me as you asked you to comment on the urbanization and the retimbering of urban settlements. I think this is a great opportunity to also bring together local communities from regions that are not necessarily urban or metropolitan, linked to the economies of the cities. But for this to happen, there must be a kind of a system by which it is not an exploitative relationship, but a fair and just relationship. Now, for example, my university is applying, or I hope we will get it. We got one part of it. I hope we get the second part of re-looking at what the forest means, and actually to look at the new timber economy, but also to go beyond the timber economy. And as you know, Akita in Japan, in the Northeast, is very well known for timber resources. But how this relationship is structured between timber producing regions like Akita and timber consuming regions like the metropolitan cities, this dynamic must be fair and just. That's very, very important to be able to sustain this producing industry. It's not only the consuming aspects, and that would be my point to the observations made by Dr. Sheldon. Dr. Sheldon. Yes. Dr. Sheldon Huber. Sheldon Huber. The second thing that I actually think IGIS is uniquely positioned. You have the ability to bring together international stakeholders and local stakeholders. Now, I'm going back to the Akita metropolitan cities relationship. I would actually like, from a local perspective, to see how fair and just solutions can be created. And I think we have to review the way we conduct partnerships. The partnerships must be creative, not just what's the word for it? Governance-centric balances or bureaucratized partnerships. They must be creative, flexible, responsive, and fast in the solutions they provide. Now, in order to do this, I think it's very important to share the resources on a common platform. Japan has some of these common data platforms for the environment. Ms. Alijabana has mentioned the importance of system science in this, and this data-driven system science-based analysis, where we draw from the world's will be very useful. And this means that sound science must drive the partnerships. It must not be just advocacy, it must be sound science that drives the partnerships. And here, I think ISAP's relationship with the universities both in Japan and across the world could be mobilized together with the whole industry. But for these new partnerships to succeed, I think Chairman Takeuchi mentioned in his opening address that we must engage the youth. And I think my second pillar would be transgenerational interactions. How do we foster these, nurture these? There are some creative elements that have come out between the Paris Agreement, where we had flag-waving activists being the kind of image of youth that was being portrayed. And by Sharm el-Sheikh, it had changed. And by COP28 in Dubai, it had changed even more. And youth are actively engaged from within in solving the problem. So I think it's very important for us to work with the generations, and being in the university, I'm constantly in touch with Gen Z and Alpha generations. Now, it's very important to transform their anger and frustration into hope. And the best way to do that is to show successes. So I would say that we impinge on them ways of creating these new partnerships. The partnerships must not have too many people to have local successes on the project. Maybe 3 groups of stakeholders, or at the most 5, but I would prefer 3, which makes it handleable and which makes it possible to make quick decisions and show results. And while doing this, it is important to make young people understand that it's important to maintain order and promote dialogue in order to be able to solve problems without getting sidetracked into agendas that can be corrupted by third parties who are not as ethical. So it's important to show the result, and the findings must be shared on this platform, and it must have just and fair. And finally, I think the big elephant in the room, other than the one that Dr. Sheldon pointed out, is industry. Our current industrial enterprise has taken a long time to understand climate change, and now they are behind it. But they still do not quite understand the importance of biodiversity loss or those other areas of threat that Dr. Sheldon showed in the re-evaluation of the tipping points in 2023. So I think it's very timely. I think the COVID-19 pandemic, as we come out of it, has shown us that biodiversity loss can actually stall industry and create hardships for lives and livelihoods. It's a very timely point. It's very timely now that we can take on industry with this aspect and get them committed to actually supporting actively biodiversity conservation partnerships. Now, I think that it's Sensei, you have done a wonderful job in showing the importance of integrating climate change with biodiversity integration, and also perhaps with geobiochemical circulatory aspects like nitrogen, phosphorus, acidification, water, and so forth. Now, in order to do this, I think it's very important that meaningful jobs must be created. And some of these hints have been provided by Dr. Schlienherber for the retimbering of cities, but I'm sure there are many others as well. A creative engagement of mobilizing industry for biodiversity restoration, which actually leads to climate change containment as well, was something that I experienced when I was a field scientist working in the Malaysian rainforest more than about 25 years ago. And there, the New England Power Corporation, which was emitting carbon emissions, bought over some of the carbon containment aspects by financing over the long term, not over the short term, over the long term, the reforestation of damaged tropical rainforests. And they did this in partnership with the Sabah Foundation, who manage about 1 million hectares of timberland. So you see, the 25 years ago, such partnerships, which are multi sort of problem solving, was in place. Now the question is, why did these fantastic examples not get translated elsewhere? There was also another case in this rainforest where the Sabah Foundation had an alliance with IKEA to be able to make their furniture from sustainable forestry. Now, these are all initiatives that we can take up anywhere, anytime soon. So I think we do have in the past, we have had in the past some creative works going on, but today we have the what we might call the informatics platforms that can actually spread these solutions. Now, I think we have a lot of the problem analysis as knowledge, but we don't have to the same extent the solutions on these intellectual platforms and these informatics platforms. So I think how we share these across countries, across generations, and even perhaps with the current AI, IoT-led language learning models, we can even do them multilingually, so that localities and central areas can be partners, even though they might speak different languages. So I think the opportunities are great, and I would suggest in the next year that perhaps if we can start a small local project, my university is happy to participate in it. And perhaps some of the lead scientists who on the Cosmos International Prize Board, which Taki-sensei is very much a part of, and university networks such as things that we have built up over the years, both in Japan and overseas. If we can design and create a project, that will be wonderful. Now, one timeline, it can't take too long. One timeline is that sometime in the spring to summer of next year, I am inviting a Cosmos International Prize winner who is very much related to some of these issues that we've been discussing. Perhaps we can partner together and make it not just something that my university's young people listen to and get inspired by, but if we can transform that into a project that is realizable, becomes an exemplar, and we can share these modalities of doing things across these cyber platforms. So I think, Taki-sensei, although it is not perhaps possible to discuss these things in detail at this conference yet, even following up on this conference, if we can create something that is a star-studded new partnership, transgenerational in its interactions, where we can mobilize industry as well to provide some lasting solutions, then I think the kind of initiatives that you have started today will become much more realistic to the lives and livelihoods of normal people as part of their everyday life. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Kasem-san, for your remarks. And very recently, I had a chance to visit his university in Akita, Akita International University. I was so impressed the active participation of the students in various activities in the international atmosphere. And also, there is a very well-designed library with the woods. This is quite a good example of how we realize what Dr. Schulhuber already mentioned, the importance of using a wood as a carbon sequestration. So thank you very much. And I very much impressed with your statement on the importance of intergenerational equity, which is the main issues that we try to highlight during this ISAP session. And we are inviting many students here at this hall, and we are expecting their active contribution to our discussions in order to fill the gap between the different generations. So I would like to move to the Miyake-san about your thoughts. Particularly, I'm expecting you could have some ideas from the business perspective.
Thank you very much, Professor Takeuchi-sensei. My name is Kahori Miyake, and I would like to, I'm a co-chair of a coalition called Japan Climate Leaders Partnership. It's a coalition of business corporations who is aggressively leading the way to net zero society. The coalition has been around since 2009, so it's been around for quite a long time. But it has gotten a lot of attention, especially this past, I would say, 5-6 years, and we have grown to a size of close to 250 companies in Japan within this coalition. Our main activities include a lot, of course, studying and influencing each other. We learn from each other, the member companies, but we also do visits to places like COP, as I was in COP this past couple of weeks ago with the members of member companies of JCLB, and we had a lot of bilateral meetings at the COP in Dubai. So we learn a lot from the global companies, and also we do heavily involved in the policy engagement as well, because in order for our companies to move forward, it is very important that we have a policy that's in align with our initiatives and our activities. So that's what we do as a coalition, and I've been a co-chair for that coalition for the past 5-6 years. It is first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a little bit unlikely place for me to be speaking, as I'm from the business side and not from the academias. So I'm a little bit nervous about what to speak, but a little bit of reflection on the keynote speech from Professor Schellenberger. I was very interested in actually, by the way, the priority of our group at the moment is to have to move forward the whole Japanese society to a carbon neutral society. And that means carbon neutral society as a whole system. So I was interested in the slides where Professor Schellenberger talked about social tipping dynamics, where a lot of elements influence each other and to accelerate the speed for a carbon neutral society. As I explained, my position is from the business side. So we have our own businesses. I'm from a bank right now. So we have a banking business in this society, but we also have to move forward and change our business systems so that to accelerate the transition of the whole society and change the business system as well. So that can be a little bit complicated, because it does not only mean that our bank has to change, but also we have to change the whole financial scheme as well, because before the carbon was not in the picture 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But now that the CO2 carbon emission is in the picture, and we have to change the whole financial sector and also the other business sector as well. So we have to change the way we do business, and that's a big challenge for us at the moment. So the tipping dynamics in terms of changing and acceleration of the whole society, it was very interesting how you how the slide explained something was enabling or intervening, like there's an intervening aspects to change the business system. One could be financial incentives, changing the incentives, how financial the investment moves around could be changed. But one very important aspect is policy change as well. We have to change the rule of how we play the game in the society. So at JCLB, we do a lot of policy engagements as well. But at the moment, I saw the picture, and it was very interesting for me to see that there's so many different elements within that social tipping dynamics that we have to consider. It's not only about business, it's not only about policy and business, but it also includes education of the young generation, and also not only the young generation, but we have to re-educate the other generation as well. So the whole system is influencing each other, and the most difficult part for us is that we don't know, it's not a direct causal relationship. It's influencing each other, and it's a dynamic move. So one of the difficult things that we are facing at the moment is we're not sure which button to press at when. So so that the whole society can move forward and accelerate. So that's one of the things. I don't have the answer at the moment, but I thought it was very interesting to see and figure out what is the important elements and the interventions are within that dynamic, so that we can have a more clear idea and plan sort of to change the whole system. One could be the roadmap is another thing. I understand that I just been working on the roadmap to net zero towards 2050. That's one thing that we can look into to see how we can figure out what to do next from the for us businesses, and also the finance system, and also the young generation, and many other different people within that picture. So I think we all have to work together. We all know that. We also all know that we have to speed up a little bit. It's taking too long. So, but we need something like that to see, understand where we are and what to do next. Within that roadmap would be something very interesting. And also that map was an interesting insight for me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Miyake-san, for clarifying the importance of the private sectors, including the financial sectors. Very recently, the day before yesterday, I had a chance to visit Nasu-Shiobara city and attended the signing ceremony between the city and local banks. And they are considering that the participation of the financial sector will be very, very important in localizing of the decarbonization activities. And from this viewpoint, if you have some ideas on this aspect, I would like to know more about this. Do you have any?
Local banks actually play a very important role in decarbonizing the local area. As I said, the non-financial sector, non-financial business sector, the corporations, manufacturers, and all these people, they don't exactly know what to do next, or they don't have the financials to do that, because you have to invest first, and you have to incentivize these business people to change their business models. And financial sector can play an important role in sort of helping out, supporting these local businesses to decarbonize their businesses. So there's a lot of financial, sustainable finances that we as a finance sector provide to the businesses in order to incentivize these businesses. And that can happen in the local areas as well.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move to the second round, starting by Dr. Takemoto.
Thank you. Thank you. Following up the interactions on the local government roles, I would like to put the additional observation in terms of role of cities or local government. Local government plays very important role in addressing not only climate change, but also the sustainability as well. I also visited the Dubai to join the COP28, and at the beginning, around the world, many mayors and leaders of local government together in Dubai to make their commitment. And the local government has the sort of the advantage to develop their own the policy and the measures implementation. That is the very important. And in Japan, in that line, the government support the local government such as the designated leading decarbonizing areas throughout this country. I think this the initiative must be the good model to share with other local government in Japan, not only in Japan, but also it is the very good practice to international community. Once again, as Professor Takeuchi mentioned, the local government organize the community and mobilize the local players. That is the very important aspect. At the same time, they have a lot of resource in their own local government areas. And I think that is the new thing to explore further the role of the local government. Just for quickly, the IPCC, it is already started the AR7 cycle, and their first commitment is the developing special report on climate change and the cities. They have already started that work, and they are going to organize scoping the meeting early next year. The Japan Ministry of the Environment, working together with IASA again, they are in the position to push or support that initiative by mobilizing their resources, not only finance, but also the human resources. They or we, I am fully involved in this process. We are preparing a special paper to make contribution. And that is the new, emerging the activities. That is the Japan would like to show our initiative based on the experience. Once again, that is the local government plays very important role among multi-stakeholders. This is just a quick follow-up point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kasem-san, I would like to ask you about your view from the international perspective. You have been in Japan for many years, but you are still serving as a very important person in Sri Lanka, your country. And how you could consider this type of a discussion could be extended to other parts of the world, particularly in the Asia and Pacific region.
Takeuchi-sensei, I think you have the ability to hit the nail on the head so accurately. Sometimes it surprises me. I am right now in Sri Lanka. It's because I've just been appointed concurrently with my job in Akita as the Chancellor of the University of Moratuwa, which is Sri Lanka's leading science and engineering university, which also has a medical school. Now, the reason I say that is because I want to get this university involved in a partnership with the Japanese Industrial Corporation that is planning to make green electric and smart vehicles out of our 1.25 million three-wheel taxis, which are emitting carbon dioxide like no one's business. But they do provide livelihoods for about 5 to 6 million people, and it is very difficult to legislate them out of existence. Now, this Japanese company has been working for the past 10 years in identifying the problem, developing the prototypes, and it's on the verge of engaging in production in Sri Lanka. Now, we see the smart platform that our universities can add to this as being more than just making the drivetrain electric. It can become an ambulance for poor people in rural communities because the taxis are everywhere in Sri Lanka, largely because public transport is poor. So, I think these kind of creative solutions in Sri Lanka, now how can they link up with Japan, which is a developed country? Now, Akita has similar problems of mobility with Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka's kind of new mobility enterprise has brought together both a manufacturing company and a very, very large design company in Japan, which employs about 750 people, but it also has what you call it, manufacturing capability. Now, I'm starting an exercise, hopefully by somewhere between the spring and the summer of this year, to train young people to be part of this transformation of mobility. So just as much as buildings could be a propulsive sector for decarbonizing, so can mobility, I think. And Akita is the home of a lot of large renewable energy from offshore and onshore wind. Now, if we could make ammonia and hydrogen fuel cells, which can then drive this transport right now, it's an immediate solution. Our buildings could have solar as well as timber. So I think there are tremendous possibilities, and this workshop that we are planning, which actually I was quite interested by Miyake Sensei's indication of where can we start. I think these energy intensive sectors like transport, buildings, infrastructure, a lot of those things can, I think, be a starting point. And I would actually like to discuss with you the nature of this workshop that we will be starting with Nichinan Corporation, Design Corporation, Technoplan Global, which is going to be the vehicle manufacturer in Sri Lanka. And the whole workshop of how we design and define the next generation of mobility. And it doesn't have to be just transport. It could be mobile cinemas. It could be mobile homes. It could be all kinds of things. So we are now trying to explore these possibilities with the creativity of the young generation. So I would be happy actually to engage with the panelists that you have created, Sensei, in some way after this conference to see how we can take this into a concrete example of how we showcase transgenerational interaction, but while engaging industry, engaging local communities, and engaging universities so that the sound science aspects are also maintained. Thank you very much for asking these questions. And I think this kind of partnership will suddenly make it possible. Now in Japan, as you know, it's very difficult to have completely transformative initiatives very quickly because the existing industrial, what you might call legacy system has many obstacles to it. But if it can be showcased in Sri Lanka as a success story, and you can create special zones for experimenting with it in places like Akita, then perhaps it will become a de facto standard over time. But this is where I think we can engage very, very closely with Miyake Sensei's JCLP. So a kind of university input to JCLP, working together with enlightened intermediaries like IISS, Takeuchi Sensei's IGS, and Takamoto Sensei's IIASA. I think just coming together with the results that we can put out. And it won't take too long to put out these results. So it's not an earth-shatteringly long time span where we have to wait for results, but we can get the results out quite immediately because these are areas which affect people's lives and livelihoods. So let's see how we can start. And then I'll be happy to help in any way I can. And of course, when I'm in trouble, I will call on my good friend Takeuchi Sensei for help. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to ask Miyake-san about the issues and today's discussion about the importance of a synergy, inclusiveness, and importance of localization. We already discussed about something like a localization and synergy, but particularly I would like to ask you about the inclusiveness, if you have any ideas.
Thank you. That's a difficult one. And Professor, thank you. I would love to have a discussion with in Akita or anywhere if you come to Tokyo about the business and the partnership between business side and the academia, universities, and the students, of course, in the universities. That would be great. Inclusiveness. I think the theme that I've been listening or hearing today in the panel is inclusiveness and also partnership. That's another similar concept, but maybe a little bit different, but similar. And I think partnership is very important. Business side don't usually have a lot of partnership with the academia or researchers, but in this climate world, we have to have more partnership and work together with each other and the youth and all that. So, and also one of the things that I've been thinking it was that we talk about business side, from business side, we talk a lot about policy engagements because we know that policy is very important. We have to change the policy. But recently, I've been thinking that, and also listening to today's panel, more, I think we should be more focusing on, not more, but as much, I would say, as much focus on the consumer engagement as well. Professor just talked about the mobility and the building that we've been talking about. These two things within the city could have to change the way we, it's the way we do our lives, we spend our days. So that needs to be done together with the people who are living in that city. So more consumer engagement will be something that I think we should be discussing a little bit further.
Yes, thank you very much. Highlighting the importance of the multi-stakeholder participation, including the consumers. And I think that decarbonization will bring us a new dimension of our lifestyle in the next generation and the future. And so I would like to, we have about 5 minutes, and so I will ask some of you to deliver your final remarks. Yes.
Thank you. Just the following up quickly the synergies. I really welcome the IGES the leadership, in particular Professor Takeuchi, you are member of expert group synergy of climate change and SDGs. At the same time, further, the biodiversity should be incorporated in this direction. In this regard, I think I would like to, as the final message, I would like to highlight the future direction in terms of the climate change should be addressed in the context of sustainable development. This is the in line with what Armida pointed out at the beginning. The sustainability transition is matter of survival. To the global south, it is very crucial to address climate change at the same time to address sustainable development. In this regard, once again, let me quote introduce the outcome of IPCC AR6 previous round cycle. They have the final chapter saying that climate resilient development, that is definitely climate change must be addressed in the context of the sustainable development. International community, developing community, they have already started changing in this regard, in that direction. Japan have to be also on that direction. In this regard, I would like to also be committed to further develop. Then coming back to the beginning of today's discussion, keynote speaker, yes, new Director General, John Sheldon Hoover. is very close to you, Professor Takeuchi. This is a very good timing. Why don't you start more concrete cooperation, bilateral cooperation between the IGS and the ISA? This is my humble the kind of proposal in this.
Yes, thank you very
space.
much. In fact, I wanted to invite him for this ISAP, but because he just joined to the IASA and he could not manage his schedule. But maybe near future,
maybe we can work together,
work together
to realize
invite
that
him.
direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have some time, so either Kasem-san or Miyake-san, do you have anything as your final remarks?
Thank you. I think in some more proactive way than has happened in the past, I think academia has to learn to engage with society better. And for the next 10 years in my university, we have 3 sort of pillars on which we want to build this transformation. We will look at global challenges, but seeking solutions. But those solutions must be based on timeless values like ethics and justice and fairness and things like that. And in order to do this, we need to have absolutely creative responses, which will require us to build new partnerships. And that is one of the reasons why I reached out to, I've known since a while, but it's the first time that I met Miyake. I hope we can come together. My last words would be actually that design, technology, and data science are likely to create the wealth in the coming years. And how we can mobilize these 3 aspects to drive home this new partnership that a carbon neutral economy will bring is the challenge. And the key to this is engagement with the global south. Now, in this 10-year plan for our university, I want to start in the first 3-year cycle with Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and Egypt, where we have very close partnerships with the global south. And the global south has come to a turning point this year. In purchasing power parity terms, the economies of the BRICS countries exceeded that of the G7. Now they have the global south as their hinterland. So you can see that the global south is going to be increasingly important in shaping the world order. However, it is also the case where it is less carbon neutral, where disparities are high, where whole host of problems is so as it is very important that whatever engagements we do and success stories we create in the global north, we must make sure that we do it in partnership with the global south so that mindsets, values, and responses can be much better managed than they have been in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We could have a very good discussion and we could get very good outcomes. For example, the importance of strengthening the science policy and society interfaces. And also he highlighted the importance of North-South collaboration. And also we highlighted the importance of intergenerational equality issues. So we could continue more, but because of the lack of time, I would like to finalize this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We will break until 11.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to begin plenary session 2, implementing solutions to climate, biodiversity, and circular economy, entry points and enabling reforms. First, I would like to introduce the speakers. We have Professor Yukari Takamura from Institute for Future Initiatives, the University of Tokyo. We also have research leader Eric Zussman from Integrated Sustainability Center, IGES, and program director Kentaro Tamura, Climate Energy of IGES, and program director of Diversity and Forest, Andre Mada from IGES. Also, program director of Sustainable Consumption and Production, IGES, Hotta Yasuhiko, and the executive director of IGES, Yasuo Takahashi, serving as a moderator. Now I'd like to ask Executive Director Takahashi to proceed with this session. Thank you very much. I would like to begin this panel discussion session. I'm Takahashi, Executive Director of IGES. In the very first session, in the beginning, we had a new director, Shulin Huber of IASA. He introduced overshoot management into 2100, climate change, biodiversity, and forest interactive relationship is also referred to. In many different areas, we have frontline experts talking about the current status of global environment and sustainable challenge and the actions that we are asked to do. We have had a wide range of discussions in the first plenary session. We talked about the importance of local governments, connection with financial sector, and also intergenerational collaboration, including the young people. And also, more importantly, at what timing and at what point should we start actions? So that is the importance of roadmap. In this second plenary session, as was just introduced, we will be focusing on climate change, biodiversity, and circular economy, and SDGs that connect all of these different domains. We have 4 leading researchers of IGES speaking to us. We also have the IGES Council, Professor Yukari Takamura from the Institute for Future Initiatives, the University of Tokyo. Based on the discussion we heard in the first plenary session, we would like to explore more specific solutions and what IGES can do to contribute. What sort of research should we pursue? So we would like to cover these questions in the free discussion. Professor Takamura has just returned back from her overseas trip. I'd like to thank Professor Takamura. Before we start the panel discussion, I would like to focus on 4 common challenges IGES has been working on. So can you show my slide? At IGES, every 4 years, we renew our research strategy. Currently, we have in the midpoint of 8th strategy. In this 8th research strategy, we put forth 4 common challenges. They represent the goals each individual unit of IGES is striving for. First of all, climate change. So mitigation and adaptation. Well, I will follow this order. So let's start with SDGs. We have to walk the talk to carry out and implement SDG measures on the ground. Secondly, climate change, basically promoting implementation of the Paris Agreement so that we can build society with net zero and resilience. And thirdly, biodiversity. Montreal Framework, a new agreement was reached in last year's COP. Based on that, we would like to promote implementation of this international framework. By 2030, we have to place biodiversity on the path to recovery. And number 4, circular economy. This is a common thread throughout different sectors. How can we make a society and economy circular? So these are four common targets. Each unit has collaborated with each other so that we can bring about positive impact on society through our research activities. As we are engaged in such research activities, the theme of ISAP today were raised and selected. There are 3, that is integration, inclusion, and localization. And we believe these 3 keywords are very important as basic and common approaches that we need to pursue. So the challenge is how to implement these 3 keywords. So in the beginning of this panel discussion, we would like to ask for research leaders to make short presentations. I want to invite Eric, Dr. Eric Zussman. He really integrates research activities at IGES from 8th strategy. Sustainability Integration Center has been established, and he is one of the leaders in that center. So he has been working on integration of research activities. So research leader of Integrated Sustainability Center, he is going to talk about the frames of integration, inclusion, and localization. So Eric, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Takahashi Shicho, and thank you, colleagues, for joining us. So as Takahashi Shicho mentioned, I am going to provide a brief framing presentation, especially with an emphasis on defining these sort of 3 key terms. But as a way to get at those 3 key terms, I really want to start with a very concrete example. This concrete example comes from outside the city of Hachinohe, which is in Aomori Prefecture. And as you can see here, my colleagues and I, beyond Mitra, and some colleagues that work on renewable energy are looking out at a rice field that has solar panels that's installed on top of it. And this is a very good local example of an interesting approach to sustainability. By renting out this land, the farmers can acquire some additional resources to make their farming more sustainable. At the same time, of course, we're generating renewable energy. We're also promoting an efficient use of natural resources, and we're sustaining livelihoods. This approach illustrates some of the main tenets or some of the main principles that underlie sustainability. But it also suggests a really important question. How can we go from very concrete examples like here we see in Hachinohe to bigger and bolder changes that we need to achieve some of the goals like the 1.5 degree target, or some of the goals that are being negotiated on plastics, or some of the goals that came out of the recently negotiated global biodiversity framework? How can we go from small changes to big changes? And what I'll argue in my presentation is there are sort of 3 key enablers. There's different entry points, there's different places we could target, but there's 3 key enablers that can help us move from small to big changes. And to do that, I'm not going to use my translation device, as Tamura-san is kindly showing me, but I'm actually going to use the clicker. And so the 3 key enablers that can produce these dynamic changes are integration. And when I talk about integration, I'm looking at this from I'm a political scientist or a governance person, so I focus a lot on different institutions. So I'm really concerned with how different institutions can promote coordination across different agencies with different sectoral concerns. And a lot of times here we have like interagency coordination mechanisms, we can share budgets across different agencies, we can rotate staff, and the emphasis here, the real main consideration is on efficiency, at least from my perspective. then localization is, really how do we take some of these global goals and bring them down to the local level, like we saw with the Hachinohe case, and make sure they're context appropriate so that they're blended with the appropriate context. And here we can have everything from training and capacity building programs. We also have a dimension here that not only brings these things down, but also can help scale them up. So a lot of times we have, fiscal decentralization, bringing resources from the government down to the local level, or providing tax incentives that will help spur changes at the local level. And then the last piece is inclusion. And this is how we can try to enable the participation of diverse voices, young, old, in some contexts, different minority groups or different religions, in processes that help us promote sustainability. And here we can have everything from, mechanisms that promote voting in elections, but also a growing emphasis, for instance, on citizens' assemblies or climate assemblies. Talk more about that in just a bit, or public comment sessions. And we can also take advantage of the internet, for instance, to promote what we call e-governance, getting inputs from citizens on publicly available websites. And here the primary focus is on equity. Now, what I want to emphasize is these three different dynamics and the supporting enabling reforms all work on different dimensions that can help us take small changes and move them into bigger changes, like the Hachinohe example. And so I want to just now illustrate a few of these different dynamics and how they apply to an entry point that I have a lot of experience in. And that's the entry point that focuses on air pollution, climate change, and health. And an area where we've tried to promote integration across different agencies on these issues is in ASEAN in Southeast Asia. So my colleagues and I have recently helped develop a haze roadmap. This is dealing with the air pollution issue. But in that roadmap, we also make very strong linkages to climate change. We also make very strong linkages to the health agenda. And in doing so, we see an opportunity for, once again, bigger and bolder changes by making these sort of sectoral linkages. We can also build support within government for a more of a whole of government approach, both at the regional level and also at the national and even at the local level. And now I'd like to highlight just one more example of this, especially the idea of localization and inclusion. And this example comes back to the country that I'm from, the United States. So many of you might be aware that the United States last year enacted a major piece of climate change legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act. But what you might not be as aware of is that many cities in the United States have also taken progressive climate action. And so this is from a city, Austin, Texas, the 10th largest city in the United States. And their climate change plan is called the Climate Equity Plan, because there's a very strong emphasis on not only localizing solutions, but also bringing in different voices from the bottom up. So they had different champions across the city that would represent different interest groups. And they would help to bring in different ideas into how do you move forward with, for instance, electric vehicles, or how do you move forward with protecting green spaces? And they have lots of different public forums to share these ideas. Now, I want to close on this example because I think it's not only important for its own right, because it illustrates localization and inclusion, but it gets back to this Hachinohe example. One of the things we're trying to do as part of a larger project on the links between climate change and health is bring some of these examples of inclusion from the United States back over to Hachinohe, share some examples also in Kawasaki and Niigata. And this is how not only we can spur bigger changes, but share examples across different countries. And that's another, I would suggest, another transformative dynamic, this sort of transnational sharing. But let me stop there and then turn the table over to, or the virtual table over to my colleague Tamura-san. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。八戸
Thank you, Eric. We just had an agreement with the Hachinohe City on research between Hachinohe and ISAP and Hachinohe and Texas. They have their local knowledge. Utilizing that, we would like to expand the results into a large-scale positive impact. Now, Mr. Tamura participated in COP28 and reported on his research. He's from climate change field. Thank you very much. My name is Samura from climate change field. I would like to introduce 3 research that we are engaged in. ISAP 1.5 degrees roadmap is one. Today is a launch day. This afternoon, we are going to have a launch session. Details, please wait until then, but I just like to give you a teaser. Sorry, this is a very busy slide, but as you can see, we have a roadmap reducing Japan's emission rapidly. But what I like to emphasize here is not just for reducing GHG emission reduction. It is more for solving socioeconomic challenges that we are going to face. In other words, what we are going to do is to help promote positive change in society. So that is really the goal of our roadmap. So in this roadmap, at a glance, you may find things that seem irrelevant to climate change. We included various social changes. For example, some of the impact of socialization, the way of manufacturing, mobility, the way we work, all of these will change as a result of advanced digitalization, and that is included. And along with these changes, companies pursue higher productivity and higher added value. For us to be able to lead better and safer livelihood. And these changes are also reflected in the roadmap, which means that we alone is going to work. We alone are not going to work on this. We will be collaborating with company partners and other organizations. As Eric said in this presentation, multiple policy areas need to be integrated, and we have to collaborate with a wide range of stakeholders. By doing so, we believe that this roadmap will be able to impact wider aspects of society. So the final goal of this roadmap is for us to start implementing basic energy plan. The next time we would like to feed input into that next basic plan, energy plan. And toward the rest of the world, we just want to emphasize that there is much more Japan can contribute. So integration, partnership, these will be our entry point. Next. Yes, this is a slide. This is another research project. This is not within Japan. We are setting a site on Asia, mitigation and adaptation in Asia, reducing GHG emission, expanding sink in Asian countries. In Asian countries' policies, these need to be integrated, and we are working on formulating a guideline. This is an ongoing project. The major key point here is, of course, this is a climate policy, but what we are trying to achieve is 2 separate fields currently, mitigation and adaptation. We want to integrate them. And what becomes important is this integration must suit the local characteristics. How these 2 will be integrated, it must be based on the conditions of different local communities. So integration and localization are 2 important keywords. Having said that, it is easy to say that these are important, but for us researchers, in order for us to progress, we have to come up with academic methodology of research. So that will be a major challenge that we have been working on hard. And this is a 3rd research. This is more focusing on adaptation. AP Plus, ongoing project in Asia Pacific countries. And adaptation related information, use cases, and so forth will be aggregated so that this can be provided to policy makers as evidence, so that they can use that as evidence-based policy making. So if we want to promote adaptation, government officials, local government, national government, researchers, and local communities, all of these stakeholders need to be involved. Utilizing this kind of information source, more positive adaptation measures can be implemented. This can be another entry point. Thank you. So we have gone beyond the traditional energy and climate policy area. Integration, localization have become keywords. Now, Andre.
Last year in COP, there was an agreement about Kunming and Montreal, and also biodiversity was mentioned.
Thank you, Takahashi-san. Okay, so I'll be talking about biodiversity, which I think is perhaps less of a familiar topic to many of you than climate. And so the level I'm going to aim at is kind of really explaining some of the basic concepts, but then also how IGES work feeds into it. So this first slide, which is from the IPBES Global Assessment, which I wish I had more time to tell you about, just illustrates the extinction levels of different vertebrate species that have happened in the past few hundred years. And you can see how they have, how steeply they have increased over the past century and exponentially since then. So we're in the middle of what's been described as an extinction crisis. There are 5 different main drivers of the extinction situation that we're in at the moment. And underlying these are many indirect drivers, demographic, economic, cultural, etc. But I'm just going to mention the 5 direct drivers here. The top one represented is land change, and that's generally considered to be the main driver of biodiversity loss. Interestingly, we're now in a situation where globally there's no net land change, but in the tropics we're losing forest and other ecosystems at a rapid rate still, even though those systems are recovering in northern latitudes and extreme southern latitudes. The second one you can see there is a representative of invasive alien species, and that's one species that's invasive in Japan, the red-eared slider. The third one represents overexploitation or overharvesting of resources, and especially in the oceans. This is, some would argue, the biggest ecological problem that we face at the moment in terms of biodiversity. The fourth one represents pollution in its various forms. And the fifth one, climate change. Now, these are the 4 main goals of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is a framework agreed upon by the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is the UN's main and overarching biodiversity convention. First one, conservation, then sustainable use, then benefit sharing, and then finance. And there are 23 targets within these, but that would be a bit too busy to include on this slide. And these relate in different ways to the different drivers of biodiversity loss. And I won't go explain all of these links here, but you can see that there are several of these links. The work that we've been doing in IGES for the past couple of years covers these focal areas. So, and I'm going to show you in a moment how they relate to the drivers as well. The first one is on international biodiversity processes. So we have several ongoing projects and publications related to IPBES, which I mentioned, and also the CBD and the G7 and G20 and other international processes. We're supporting these processes in various ways and also researching the background information that leads into them. The second one, the commodity supply chains. This is something that's relatively new, but it's related to the business aspect of things, of course. Again, a couple of projects and several publications. And then timber
timber legality policy. We have a team working on that particular issue, looking at supply chains into Japan, especially, so import supply chains. And this information has fed into Japan's Clean Wood Act, which is currently being revised. Then ecosystem restoration. I should actually look at these going. Here is just an illustration of the links. Ecosystem restoration, we have a particular project in the recovery of Mauritius after the oil spill that happened there a couple of years ago. We're supporting a JICA project. We're working on biodiversity planning, especially feeding into national biodiversity planning, and we've produced a guide with United Nations University and the CBD Secretariat. And then we've also done some work on COVID-19, and this is mostly research work and report writing work rather than projects, but including a publication in a top journal. So this is, as you can see, how our work, missing a couple of arrows there, how our work relates to the 5 drivers. And as you can see, it's equally interconnected as the Global Biodiversity Framework drivers are. And therefore, it's also related to the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is the framework that guides everybody's biodiversity strategies until the end of this decade. So we are very much oriented around that, that focus. And this slide just shows, it's the last slide that I have, just shows how our work relates to the different areas of focus globally and locally. So at the international level, you have assessment. At the national level, you have assessment. And at the local level, or the real world level, you also have assessment. And then I can't go into these, unfortunately, because of time. But then also planning, and you can see the Global Biodiversity Framework on the left side there, which feeds into national and local levels. And then also reporting, which happens all three of these levels. And the work that we've been focusing on is at the international level, especially with IPBES and the CBD and G7 and G20, as I've mentioned. We've also been feeding into the CBD's negotiation processes and also research that feeds into those processes. And then also on completely the other side of the spectrum, on the local level, we've been working with some cities on their local biodiversity strategies and action plans. And in the next couple of years, we're planning to fill in some gaps here. To fill in a gap here, which is at the national level, and especially on the planning and reporting side of things. And this is based on the work that we have been doing with the CBD and United Nations University. So planning to kind of fill these gaps and cover as many of the bases that we can, which relates back to the drivers that I introduced earlier on. I think I better stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Biodiversity, there are many reasons that are interrelated to cause the loss of biodiversity. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Hotta of Sustainable Consumption and Production. Recently, there has been a discussion on international framework to ban the use of plastics. So can you talk about that too? Yes, I would like to introduce integration, localization, inclusion-related research. I have 3 examples. As Executive Director said, as a global issue, plastic has caught a lot of attention. Plastics. It's not because of the nature of its material. It is more recognized as an entry into circular economy. For example, when you think of material circulation, food comes to my mind, or textile, metal, fiber, automotives, home appliances, or as we discussed in the opening, construction materials. They are all very important. And every one of these has much to do with plastics. So working on plastics is really going to be a comprehensive countermeasure. Compared to other materials circulation, think of G20 Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. By 2030, the vision set forth ambitious goal to make or eliminate new plastic flow into the ocean by 2050. We also have international agreement coming up to ban the plastic pollution. Now, if you look at where we live, Asia Pacific region, this region is recognized as very important because it is a hot spot of causing plastics pollution. Although the resource circulation has never been really successful in this region, but there has been momentum in this area today. On a global level or on a regional level, Southeast Asian region, or national level or community level, in every one of these levels, there have been efforts made. But in terms of setting international goal, we have to translate that to local actions, or the national issues. The regional issues need to be also reflected in international initiatives. And this is where Asia Pacific can play an important role. So that was integration. Now I want to talk about localization and inclusion as well. In Da Nang City of Vietnam, we have been involved with Da Nang City to better manage waste. There has been a very interesting use case, which I'd like to introduce. Now, Vietnam in 2020 introduced the revised environmental protection law, mandating the sorting waste and recycling. So how Da Nang is going to implement that, this is where we came into the picture. The food waste has already been collected, used as a livestock feed. And we're looking at Da Nang City wondering how they are going to comply with this new plan. They recognize the waste collection, and collector will actually have interaction with the community members so that what they are doing will be recognized by the citizens and livestock farmers as well. And when they work on recycling, they will be recognized by wider community, and they can be proud of what they are doing. And we were also discussing how this can be deployed to other cities. We saw the discussion between the city officials and livestock farmers. So I believe inclusion starts with communication like that. So what we have to do is to provide an environment where this natural communication occurs and promote mutual understanding. But just supporting a community effort is not going to spread the good cases. Paris Agreement, for example, we have specific 1.5 degrees target, and plastic by 2050, we want to eliminate all the marine plastic flowing into the ocean. Each community, each household, what does that mean to each one of these stakeholders? So what we have to do is have discussion and consider what each player can do. And we have to promote an experiment and collect information from that experiment and use that to be reflected in international negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you can see here at IJUS, especially in Asia, we are focusing on going to the local areas, and together with the community people, we have such researches. So we have Asian researchers are very active here as well. So now from foreign leaders we have heard. So I would like to ask Professor Takamura for her comment. So as you listen to four speakers, the researchers, do you have any questions or comments? And then I would like to go into the discussion. Thank you very much. So Mr. Tamura talked about climate change, and Andre, biodiversity, and Hotta-san, circular economy, and Eric, framing. So Eric especially talked about transformative dynamics, and he focused on 3 concepts, keywords, the entry points: integration, inclusion, and localization. So integration and inclusion. So integration of many different environmental issues. At the same time, we can integrate social, economic, and environmental issues. So integration of social and also environmental issues. And as I listen to all of you, for what do we have to integrate and for what do we have to include? When we think about this, each individual well-being should be enhanced, and how we can do it is important. And of course, environmental issues are very important issues to address it. So enhancement of well-being is such a big theme under which we have this conceptualization, the framing. So this integration, inclusion, and localization. Actually, Takechi-san has joined us about formation of new basic environmental plan, in which these are very important themes. So in that sense, researchers and also policy advocacy by IGES are very, very important in that sense. And for business community, this kind of environmental and societal issues integrated into their business management, that is a challenging matter for the business communities as well. They are addressing climate change, but actually they are impacting biodiversity. And so for companies, it's a risk. And also, if we can have any win-win situation, that should be a very big opportunities for the companies as well. IGES is focusing on carbon market in their researches as well. In terms of carbon market, this kind of quality credit market integration is very important, and that's a challenge. And one more thing from me. Implementation is one of the challenges that's included in the theme of this discussion. So integration of policy and also environmental issues, and also social and economic integration to enhance well-being, that is a very big theme. The 6th basic environmental plan is based on that kind of discussion, and for companies as well, how they can impact the society by their business. So I have two questions. Right now I talked about integration, but in reality, there are complex issues we have to solve. And we cannot always enjoy synergy effect, because sometimes you see trade-off situations that might have negative impact on certain areas, and also there is no positive impact on certain social issues. In that sense, especially, well, 3 focus area leaders in your area, from that aspect, what is the most important challenges that you have to tackle with? This is a topic and this is an issue for you. Could you please elaborate on your area? That's one. My second question is to Eric, but to individual leaders as well, if you have an answer. So when you think about implementation, when you have realistic implementation, and when you want to achieve win-win relationships, how should we form policies? And how would we evaluate the policies? And how should we establish policies? Those are very important things. And as was reported first, based on science, that's important, and information that is important, and also human resources and financial resources. Those are very important things, as was mentioned by the speakers. So policy making and also during the process of decision making for policies, how can we achieve win-win situations with integration and inclusion? What is the key important initiative? Any good practice you can share with us, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. She was very to the point as the central council of the government. Very high quality questions. So I'd like to invite for leaders to answer, starting with Eric-san. Especially as we try to implement the integration, what becomes important in the process of formulating policies? So Eric, would you like to make a comment?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Takemoto-sensei. It's really useful questions, and I think this discussion of implementation is critical. In the field that I work in, we talk a lot in governance about persistent implementation gaps. So you can formulate, any type of international agreement that has sort of some broad terms, but how do we actually do something on the ground? And I'd like to highlight two examples that also speak to some of the questions that you raised. One is from a researcher's perspective. Okay, so I think, a lot of this focus on synergies and trade-offs and integration, we're constantly or we're consistently turning more towards the modeling framework, science-based models or evidence-based models to inform our policy recommendations. And we're also doing this to some extent, Tomono-san highlighted with the co-design process, bringing in different stakeholders. Okay, so I think that's important. But the other side of this is I think we don't do, from a researcher's perspective, I don't think we do a very good job of analysis of barriers to implementation. So whether or not governments have sufficient capacity, whether or not governments have coordination mechanisms in place, whether or not they have fiscal mechanisms that can transport resources from the local to the national level, those type of issues are not featured explicitly in the modeling frameworks. So what we've done in my group, I mean, some of my colleagues, Kaoru Akahoshi, I'm not sure if she's here right now, but she's worked with me on, we do surveys with policymakers to ask them, if you have these barriers, these institutional or social barriers, how much might they slow the implementation of key reforms? So how much might they slow the transition to e-vehicles? How much might they slow the implementation of inspection and maintenance programs for older vehicles? And what we're doing is we're taking that knowledge on how much they slow and bringing it back into some of these assessment models and saying to policymakers, if you don't put in place these enabling reforms, capacity building, institutional strengthening, or fiscal reforms, then you won't be able to achieve the emission reductions or the multiple benefits, the synergies you hope to achieve. So I think this is a first key point that I'd like to illustrate from a researcher's perspective. And the second thing I'd like to talk about in terms of implementation goes back again to the United States example. And here I think my colleague Mark Elder is in the audience, and one of the things Mark is always underlining is climate policy is very much about industrial policy, right? And if you look at the recent climate legislation from the United States, one of the interesting things about it is there was an explicit effort to try to target job building programs in places that don't traditionally care about climate change, or places that we called red districts, places that have Republican leadership. And so some of the places that are getting resources from that bill, from this national piece of legislation, are trying to minimize trade-offs, if you will, and also build political synergies. I think the emphasis on politics is very important. Political economy is very important. With places that might not traditionally vote for climate change policies. So they put a sort of new dimension on it. They make a political economy argument for it. And once you start building factories in places to, build electric vehicles or build wind turbines, then you can convert people that might not necessarily believe in the sort of, what we consider gospel of climate change. And I think that conversion is extremely important for, building the case for transformative change. All of a sudden you have quote unquote red districts that might turn a little bit combination between red and blue, purple, if you will. And that can put in place some of the political and economic drivers that can build change at scale. So those are 2 points I'd like to emphasize.
はい、ありがとうございました。じゃあ次に田村さんですけど、もう時間。
Thank you very much. We are running out of time, so I'd like to ask each one to speak only 3 minutes. So Tamura-san, please. Thank you very much for your question. I just want to talk about 1.5-degree roadmap. So as we want to implement that roadmap, we will face trade-offs. So I'd like to give thought to trade-offs that we are going to face. Now, in the roadmap, we have to make sure that we have to utilize renewable energy to the fullest, highest extent. And that is the assumption. And as you know, in recent news media, mega solars are criticized for destroying the local forests, impacting negatively the well-being of local communities. The same goes for onshore wind as well. So we want to introduce renewable energies, but there are also other areas, local community well-being and possibly biodiversity. So there are always these trade-off discussions. So how can we solve these trade-offs? One thing we can do is for solar energy, we are trying to promote solar panels placed on rooftops. And as Eric introduced, solar sharing is another possible solution. Having said that, if we want to implement that, there are other factors that we need to consider. There are other the barriers that we need to overcome. If it's agri-solar sharing, farmers may be aged, they may not have any successors, and it's very impossible, very difficult to try to get funding for coming 20, 30 years. Think of rooftop solar panels. We believe that that has to be compulsory in a way, but in order to make that more attractive, surplus electricity should be shared or used more flexibly. It should be treated flexibly as well. So we have to set up a new system to make that possible. Well, in that sense, it means that we have to build a lot of different systems and structures. So that is one way to overcome some of the trade-offs that we expect to see in the future. Thank you very much. Now, Andre-san, please.
Just two quick points. The one is on trade-offs, and my colleagues know that I'm going to talk about this because I love talking about it. But I think the point that that I often like to make, and which you alluded to here, is that there are synergies and trade-offs, but there are always trade-offs. I think that's the key thing. And the economist Thomas Sowell said there are no solutions. There are literally no solutions. There are only trade-offs. Sometimes the trade-offs are very small, but they're always there. And these problems that we're talking about, when you're thinking about all of the SDGs, if you assume that all of society's goals are encompassed by the SDGs, whatever goal you're aiming at, there's going to be some trade-off somewhere else. So it's a case of weighing up one against the other. And that's really the challenge that we face. The other thing I wanted to point out was just in answer to your question, Professor, I think that perhaps the biggest issue is awareness. And I know it's easy to say that and it's very general, but the flow of logic that I see is that, and this is particular to democratic societies, it doesn't work in authoritarian regimes, but in democratic societies, if people are aware of a problem like climate or biodiversity loss, then their votes are going to determine what policy is going to come out of that. But also their consumer choices, and this is perhaps even more important. So what the public know is really everything kind of flows from that. And one thing that I would warn against is demonizing business and corporations and even big oil, these big companies that we love to criticize. They are big and they're successful because we buy their products, we the consumers. And I think it's just really important to always keep that connection in mind. Maybe also just one final thought is that just over the past few years, I've made a point of trying to listen to as many sides of discussions as possible, even if I don't agree with them. So in the US, for example, the Democrats and the Republicans and the Libertarians, and all of them have something interesting to say. You know, none of them are in it purely for selfish reasons. And so I think that opening our minds to various different perspectives is also a very important aspect. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much, Hota-san. Thank you. So Andrew mentioned trade-offs. When we see trade-offs, what kind of decisions do you have to make? Appropriate prioritization should be very important. So what is appropriate prioritization? You need some conditions, 2 conditions, I think. You have a challenge, and also stakeholders should participate in decision makings. That's 1. And number 2, related data. Data should be there, and based on the data, you have to make decisions. And that's the condition as well. So, because we are talking about promotion of the circular economy and also resource circulation. And in developing countries, of course, the stakeholders are informal sectors. For example, cleaners and also non-local governmental people, informal sector workers who don't belong to the government, and they are collectors of waste, and they collect and also recycle those things. And those are very important stakeholders. So you have to involve those people. Otherwise, you cannot make proper decisions and prioritization. For example, we were talking about Danan City. Amendment of the environmental law, protection law. If they want to do it, well, you can use cleaning corporation to collect everything. But there are pig farmers, and they lose at the feed for the pigs, and that's a trade-off. When the benefit is large, you can postpone such activities, or you can improve the current systems, and that's the advice I try to give. And another one is about data. In informal sector, we don't know how much waste is generated and how much is recycled. We do not have the data. So if the wastes are recycled, we can talk about what kind of benefit we have, and we can talk about negative aspects when we have data. So we have to recognize the actual reality, and we have to collect data so that we can prioritize the issues. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are running out of time, so Professor Takamura, as you listened, if you have any additional questions, you can ask, or if not, you can probably summarize the discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much for the discussion. As I mentioned before, what we have discussed right now is this environmental policy of Japan, and in a wider sense, we are talking about policies and also for business communities, how they run companies. They have to consider challenges and also how they should make decisions vis-a-vis social challenges. Well, science is very important, and also co-creation, and also processes for decision making, and also data that's included in science. That's important. And what are the challenges, as Eric said, for implementation? Locally, the situations might be different. So how should we confirm all of them and set the goals and challenges? Those processes based on science is very important, very important. And to participate in the processes. So the knowledge as agency, that is very important, I guess, as Andrea says. And what was very interesting for me today is we are facing such environmental and social problems which are so huge. That means if you want to solve them, you really need to transform the society. In that sense, this time we talked about integration, inclusion, especially those two keywords, and to make them realistic. That means we should transform the society to a better direction, and we have to show it. So, huge transformation, and we need social cohesion to address it all together, and we have to create the foundation for that. It was very interesting with such insight, especially change agent by IGES is such a very important keyword. This is a mission for IGES, I believe. Science for transformation. The role of science is the focus in the Western world as well. So science for transformation. I would like to expect IGES to proceed with it. Thank you very much. Today's theme was integration, inclusion, and localization. All of them are very important themes. They really represent our problems right now, and those are very important elements for the new basic plan and also for business management as well. And that's the direction of IGES. I think that is appropriate for IGES, and how we should deliver on the promise is very important. So from the aspect of environment, and we have to challenge a wider scope of issues such as social and economic issues. So those are the new issues that I just have to tackle. And the next one is the 9th from April 2025. That's the new plan. And the discussion is going to start from the beginning of the year. I just would like to start discussions as well. Based on the discussion we had today, well, IGES consists of so many researchers with many different backgrounds. So we have such uniqueness, and leveraging this uniqueness, we would like to contribute to the huge social transformation going forward based on science, science-based approach, science-based evidence, based on which we would like to propose and advocate policies continually. So I really appreciate all those stakeholders inside and outside of Japan, and the collaboration is very important going forward as well. And I really hope that you're going to continue your support to IGES going forward as well. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you very much. With this, we'd like to close this panel, and after that, we are going to have parallel sessions. We have 3 venues, 1.5-degree roadmap and COP28 report, and also climate change and security. We have different themes, and also CES, circulating ecological sphere, and also Indian air pollution and cooperation by Japan, and also the report on the externality or invasive species. And for the first time, later we would like to invite younger generations so that they can talk about how they view these issues and also the future visions. That's the last session. So please participate. I really hope you can enjoy it toward the end of this conference. Thank you very much. With this, we'd like to close the second session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the panelists. With this, we'd like to close plenary session 2. Thank you very much for waiting. Now we'd like to start the closing session, reflecting on ISAP with the younger generation. prospects for the next 50 years. First of all, I'd like to introduce the panelists. From Otawara Kanagote Firm, Inc., Ashigara Forest Conference, Chiba Ecology Energy, Inc., Mr. Makoto Hasegawa. From Climate Youth Japan West Team President, Mr. Asahi Kim. And Japan Youth Platform for Sustainability, Mr. Tasuku Azuma. Change Our Next Decade President, Ms. Mizuho Shibazaki. IGES Sustainable Consumption and Production Policy Researcher, Alice Yamabe. And also, Acting Managing Director of IGES, Tsuyoshi Kawakami. So from here, I'd like to give the microphone to Kawakami Tsuyoshi, the Acting Managing Director of IGES. Mr. Kawakami, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Now, we'd like to start the closing session, reflecting on ISAP with the younger generation prospects for the next 50 years. I'd like to split the session into two parts. In the first part, I'd like everyone to talk about your impression about this forum, just freely. It's a free discussion. And the next part is we like to look into the future. As of this year, after the keynote speech, and we had the plenary session 1, Alumina-san, Kashimoto-san, Miyake-san had such candid discussions, and including inclusiveness, we had the Young Generation Partnership, and also impartiality, we had discussions on these as well. And Mr. Takahashi was the chair for the plenary session 2, and each researchers discussed their themes. And also Dr. Takamura had a question about trade-offs and implementations. And also we deepened our understanding about inclusion and also integration. And in the afternoon, we had 3 thematic tracks, and all of you are participating in them. So the theme for this year, integration, localization, and inclusion. What was your impression on these themes? First, Hasegawa-san, please.
Thank you very much. So my impression, there are 2 or 3 things that I'd like to share today. In the keynote presentation, which focused on the seriousness of planetary boundary, 1.5 degrees target that's been agreed, it's been slow progress. There has been progress, but not enough, not quick enough. I was born in 1997, the year of Kyoto Protocol, and since then we have experienced global warming. The lack of change, as we discussed in the Adaptation Forum, is the lack of stakeholders. We did not see every stakeholder participating in the behavioral change, and I think this is the major reasons for the slowness. Citizens and businesses, the components of society, recognize the need of countermeasures against global warming, and this is the necessity. How can we invite them to participate? How can we encourage them to take voluntary participation? But it's very difficult if we focus only on climate change because they are not particularly interested. So we should focus on individual well-being. It might be easier for us to get the consensus. So we have to select a theme where businesses and individuals can participate and agree upon for better behavioral change. Listening to 1.5 degrees roadmap, but personally, I think this is a wonderful thing. So I like to use that, reflect that into my own actions. Whether my action behaviors leading to 1.5 degrees, is it in line with that degree? Am I contributing to reducing possible negative impact? So I just want to study this roadmap once again so that I can change my own behaviors. Thank you. So, Kin-san, please.
Yes, I was in parallel session number 2, CS, and number 4, COP report. So I was in the 2 seminars, so I have one comment for each. The first one, CS, and mainstreaming. Localization is a very big theme. So participation of the citizens is very important, and also love to their communities and communication hometowns. So stakeholder communication is very important. That's what I learned. And also 50 years in the later, what's the future? I would like to talk about this too. But looking back at 50 years before 1973, Small is Beautiful was the book that was published. Schumacher says that technology to show people's faces. And after 50 years, we talk about communication and citizen participations. And right now, this idea is really cherished after 50 years. And COP reporting seminar, I study economics. So economically, I wanted to think about things during the seminar. That was very difficult, but just simply speaking, 100 billion yen of financial support to emerging countries, and that was what they were talking about. So economic growth and also technological innovation, those are not the only financial support, but we are really supporting emerging countries. That is very good. But rather, in terms of GDP, Japan is still very low. We can contribute more money. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next is Azuma-san.
Can you hear my voice? I was in the plenary session and also parallel sessions. I'd like to give you my impression. With regard to plenary sessions, too, Mr. Andre Matter said that we should listen to the party who has disagreeing opinions. It is very important to listen to every aspect, every perspective. And I completely agree. And also another thing, in Da Nang, Vietnam, food waste has been collected to be fed into swine, the livestock industry. This is something that we can learn in Japan. In parallel session 5, we talked about the countermeasures to fight against the air pollution in India. So Japan's transferring Japan's technologies to India to solve that problem. So it's just one-way street, but if we can make it mutual so that we can learn from each other, it's mutually helpful relationship that we should build. In parallel session 3 as well, in Asia Pacific, especially I lived in Fiji, the professor of the university in Fiji said that they had to move 2 kilometers from the coast to inland area because of the possibility of disaster. It takes time, it takes money if you have to move, and you have to get agreement from the local communities for them to be able to move. So you have to have a whole discussion which must be built on partnership. So that's the impression that I get from that session. Thank you.
So Shibasaki-san? Yes. Thank you. I went to the plenary session and also I went to parallel session about the invasive species. And about the invasive species session, our specialty is biodiversity. And the room of the section was very, very small, and there were very few participants. So compared to COP session, it was very small. But as I listened to the session, It was very impressive because they were very comprehensive and thorough, and they were doing such invasive species reports involving a lot of stakeholders, taking 4 years. So they had a lot of hope. Of course, we have to solve the issue, and we have paths to solve issues, and we still have a long path. And I was thinking about what I can do to contribute, but this is not really totally unrelated things for us. Well, for example, we have some kind of ants and also turtles, some invasive species in Japan we have. So it's not only about the invasive species that should lead to the problems about our health and also food security issues, and every issue is connected. And I really would like so many people to know about this issue. And for plenary session, it was such an eye-opening session, and there were so many contents that really opened my eyes, especially in the morning session. They talked about the expectations to youth, and also they were looking forward to our activities from the younger generations. And many panelists mentioned this, and I really felt the expectation, and I really felt motivation and also courage. But at the same time, I said to myself, it's not only the youth that has to take an action. All of us, including adults, have to take actions together, hand in hand. Thank you very much. Thank you. I agree.
Now, Yamabe-san, please. Thank you very much. Integrated approach in parallel session 2, CES approach and examples were very useful to me. For example, in Yokohama City, sustainable renewable energies that can be created in the city will be very small. It's only 10% of the total consumption. So city decided to work with other municipalities to be able to have energy transferred. And Minami Sanriku in Miyagi Prefecture had another example, integrated approach for decarbonization. They emphasized the importance of communicating the benefits of that to citizens. So the CES approach, integrated approach, must be built upon the local communities' consensus and agreement. And I think for our future research for decarbonization, we have to build agreement with the local community members and various stakeholders. Unless otherwise, it will be very difficult to make progress. And in terms of integration, especially in a plenary session, vulnerable people and minorities in society, in other words, informal sector, and their voices need to be heard and reflected in policies. For example, citizens meeting, e-governance are new aspects of policy making, and I was impressed by that. That will become the key factor. Also, I looked at some of the posters. They gave me great inspiration, especially seaweed bed restoration. Underwater drones utilized for that, ceramic tiles can contain bacteria to absorb CO2, and some of these new developments are quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You talked about integration, inclusion, and localization, and all of you are very much aware of the importance. So integration, inclusion, and localization. Do you have some other comments on these? That means, so why those three? It might be hard for you to understand. Well, all of them are very important, but for example, diversity. Well, for diversity, those three are very important. So suppose there is this diversity at the center, And when you have a lot of challenges, you need to have integrated approaches. So integration comes from at the center. It's an extension of the diversification. And also, suppose there are so many different aspects, and different aspects should be included for diversification. So in the middle, you have this inclusion, you have different approaches and also social norms. For implementation socially, you need to extend your arrow to reach localization. So organically, all of them are connected very closely. As Yamabe-san says, they are all important. So we have very, very limited time for this session. So the first part is to look at ISAP with the younger generation. And second part, I believe you have a presentation ready, each of you. So from now on, we'd like to go to the second part. So we are talking about the future. So I don't have to summarize anything. We just have an open-ended discussion, even if we have limited time. So first of all, I'd like to give you some example. I have slides. To set up the issue, so how the current generation should be responsible for the future generation. As you know, generally speaking, the future world should be advanced. On top of the victims of the old generations, we have to assume responsibility. And between current and also future generations, we have conflict of interest because we have limited resources. And if we use up all of them in the current generation, and we have to think about keeping waste that should be handled by the future generations, and we cannot really complain about it. We have invisible generations, and we don't have any coordinating system to bridge between different generations. This is a big challenge for us. And recently, the basis of the economic and social activities, we have sharing community. That means we share the same era, and we have binding commitments, and that is the foundation of the social and economic activities. So if there is any bad tradition, we have to be removed from that. But that means we'll have to be responsible for the future. But at the same time, we have to be very careful about ignoring the future. And also deepening of the social norms. Well, this is one of the ideas. For example, Mr. Dennis Banks, this is a US person, very famous. When I think about 7 generations later, you have to take an action for those 7 generations later. So beyond the border of the social norms, you have to take an action. And in Japan, humanity in the future should be the proxy of the pioneers and our ancestors. That means we have to return the favor and we have to connect to the next generations. So we have very important norms of the society, and we have to pass the beautiful earth on to the next generations from the current generation. And as we have discussed in the morning session, we do have technology and knowledge, and they are getting more and more robust and also precise. But we shouldn't forget this one. Kitaro Ikutaro Nishida has written this one about the research on goodness. Well, as in the modern society, when knowledge is advanced too much, it's difficult to unify the knowledge and also emotions. So we have to think about the wealth of our life and also our emotion. And another one is a Nobel economic laureate, Amartya Sen, says that Adam Smith used his book to talk about the importance of the ethics and also emotion. However, nowadays the technological advancement and also emotional advancement are separated, so both should be achieved. This post SDGs picture, this is a wedding cake you can see so often. It's like a German cake and planetary boundary idea is included as well. So what's the reality? Well, we have a lot of burden on the economy and also environment as well. And to go deeper into this one, number 17 goal of SDG. This is focusing on individuals and also community, and also cross-sectional peace, and also to reduce inequities. So those are the goals, and also within the goal, there are some norms written. And as you know, 17 goals have 169 targets altogether. So within these targets, we have norms. So these are the norms. We have different ones, for example, impartiality, fairness, safety, prevention. And one of the theme was integration for this theme. So for example, social, environment, and economy, cross-sectional, and also vertical integration, and all of the targets should be included. However, recently, because of COVID-19 and also armed conflicts, all of a sudden, all of them are forgotten. We shouldn't forget something very important. Those norms, I'd like to look into this. As you can see, empathy, self-control, and also justice. And a basic norm to maintain social order, trust in the public. Maybe this is a little bit different. The mechanism of things and systems should be comprehensively understood. Well, there's such a deviation. Well, these are the kanji characters which are very close to us, but this is very different from the modern society. So interpretation for the modern society is this one. In many senses, we have very important concepts and norms like this. Especially, capacity building in SDGs is very important, and creation, creative destruction, innovation, and competition, and co-creation, and also democracy. This is part of the politics. And we have to establish all of them in the society. By doing so, we can achieve high level of well-being. This is one idea. So abundant society and future should be created like this. This is a very simple idea. And then I would like you to predict the future boldly, or your expectation about the future society. Could you please present your idea? So changing the order, Yamabe-san first, please.
Thank you very much. So I would like to talk about rethinking food from 2050 net zero perspective. Next, please. Current food system is one of the major reasons for increased environmental burden. By 2050, 3 changes are expected in food system. Healthy to earth and people, and food safety and nutrition will be satisfied, and there will be circular system without generating any food waste, starting with the food livelihood. Excessive food will be reviewed, so the diet will be a planetary health diet, healthy to people, healthy to earth. In 2019, Eat Lancet Committee proposed this planetary health diet concept. Avoiding meats, focusing on ingestion of vegetables is a major shift. By 2050, 10 billion people will be able to receive sufficient food supply with this. I just focusing on food and environment and climate. We have started research on food system as well. The impact on biodiversity by food need to be visualized through individual index or indicators, and then consider local interference measures, talking with community members, and then we come up with national guideline. Population is increasing in some areas of the planet. We have to make sure food safety and nutrition available to people, and food production and logistic workers' life need to be stabilized as well. To do this, local production, local consumption must be taken for granted. People who eat will be able to produce food. That will be one of the keys. Foodscaping, which has become popular in overseas, is one good example. The landscape of the urban area, the public spaces, or any open space, people will be able to grow food like vegetables, and anybody could harvest the vegetables. And the harvest will be shared in a community that will invigorate the local economy, and this will help children learn about food. By 2050, we would like to see foodscaping in every part of urban areas. Next. Lastly, no waste from table. So this is the complete circulatory system. In Japan, 5.22 million tons of food is wasted. Half of that comes from household sector. When food is more than you need, it's shared with your neighbors. It's been tradition. Noto Peninsula and Sadogashima Island, they have highest self-sufficiency in terms of food, and they are playing quite important roles to ensure resilience of communities. In urbanized environment, however, this tradition of food sharing is very difficult to implement. However, in recent years, we see a new form of food sharing, that is ICT food sharing application. This can connect people to people. By doing so, we'll be able to reduce household food loss. It's not just limited to food. The household waste can be recycled. Chemical agricultural chemicals can be avoided. We can utilize that for household gardens and also foodscape as well. To realize a society like this, please go to the next slide. People currently, they simply purchase food. They are on the receiving side, but they have to take the initiative. They have to be the food citizenship to control the food system, participating every level of food chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are running out of time, so we'd like to make it short. I really appreciate it. Shibazaki-san, please. Yes, to look at 50 years in the future, and in terms of biodiversity, what kind of society I'd like to look at in 50 years. There are 3 points. The first one is climate action and also synergy with the biodiversity, and also sustainable cities and communities, and also activation of the forest and fishery industry. The first one is nature positive. This is essential. Just very briefly, I'd like to talk about this nature positive. Well, how many of you have understood this nature positive? How many of you have understood and heard about it? Well, many people are here. That's very good. There are so many people. Just very briefly, right now, biodiversity is a problem because we have a lot of endangered species. Every year it's increasing. That means our lives are very close to those species, and we depend on each other. So that means human beings cannot survive. This is a very important target for us as well. And 2020 is the baseline year, and compared to this year, we should not reduce the number. So by 2030, compared to 2020, we'll have to increase the number to recover the biodiversity. And also by 2050, we'll have to recover the whole situation, and the ecological situation should be fully restored. And this is a graph. Is it really feasible or not? Many people say, but depending on what we do, yes, we have room to improve the situation because this is a maximum initiative. And if everyone takes any action, we can achieve the best scenario. And if we can do it, we can achieve those numbers. It should be very difficult. However, what we have to do is clear. Nature positive and also biodiversity. Not only that, we have to review the economic activities drastically, and also you can see different colors in the graph. And one of them is climate action, zero carbon, and also circular economy, SDGs, Paris Agreement. Those initiatives are included in these too. These are essential. And nature positive for this target, especially we have to focus on 8 different areas. For example, food security and one health and city lives, and also water, ocean, and desalination. So these are the initiatives, but not only that, all of them are connected. We shouldn't focus on only one of them, so we have to collaboratively approach in those different areas. And of course, theoretically, it's very possible. However, it's very difficult. That's for sure. Why we have to do it, even if it's difficult. But unless we achieve nature positive, we cannot sustain our society and economy by 2050. So we have to try very hard to achieve this nature positive. And those are 8 very important areas: climate action and also forestry, fishery areas. First one, synergy between biodiversity and climate action. From the morning session, we were discussing this. So just very briefly, first of all, climate action. We have to consider the impact of the climate action on biodiversity. We have to consider malicious impact. Well, there are cross-sectional challenges we have to be aware of. And also, this is a system for rulemaking as well. So in that sense, we have to strengthen the synergy between those two. And nature-based solutions, NBS, and green infrastructure and eco-DRR, that should be streamlined together with the climate actions. those should be mainstreamed as well. And also we have to create cities and communities where we can continue to live. When we think about future, 20% of Japan is going to be non-inhabitable cities or villages. Well, do you think your hometowns can be livable in 50 years? My parents' home is in a rural area, and I imagine maybe my hometown is going to disappear. And maybe among your areas, well, you might have some cities where all the inhabitants are going to disappear, but we have to keep them with initiatives. That's important as well. So, how we should recover the situation when we consider communities, we have to create cities where you want to continue to live in, and this is a key word. Well-being is an important point as well. So we need to consider uniqueness and history of each community to create good community for the future. And another key word, a climate city council. Bottom-up discussions. Bottom-up discussions to aim at 50 years in the future and 30 years future. And we have to have discussions in the community and implement them in local areas for sustainable cities. And to realize that, we have to reform our lifestyle. As was mentioned, food and food culture should be reviewed as well. And activation of the forestry, fishery industries. We have to foster human resources in these areas as well. Well, together with fishermen, I do researches and I do my work. So when I go to the sea, well, I sometimes wonder, will fish first or fishermen first to disappear? You can't really laugh. It's a serious situation. So we have to preserve the environment, the marine environment. That's very important. We can use ICT technology to promote fishery and agriculture, and also from the mountains to the sea. We have to consider continuum of the ecosystem to implement this industry. Thank you very much. I'll pass the microphone to the next person.
So Asuma-san, please. I'll try to be brief. So 3 things just want to focus on. First, right in the middle, boomerang consumption. It means recycling. Boomerang, its design is to, when you throw it, it's supposed to be coming back. So you have to design plastic bottle, and how we have to consider from the beginning how to recycle this metal part, plastic part, and also design the paths of recycling. As if you throw a boomerang, recycle is a circle that we do not see every part of it, but in 50 years from today, we believe this recycled society will be boomerang or boomerang consumption. This is true for plastic waste. We were not able to recycle plastic waste sufficiently. We now have microplastics in the ocean. It's been said that it's already inside a human's blood flow. So we are being hurt by simply leaking plastic waste. So we need to collect that. And also on the left-hand side, it is important to understand that we have to exist with risk. Think about the future 1 year from today or 50 years from today, it's the same thing. I think it is important to minimize risks, especially a risk that may develop into major disaster. COVID-19, dengue fever, infection diseases, we know that these diseases, infections will negatively affect economy substantially too. So a policy must be made considering that. Media report as well should be designed considering that we have to live with risks. In the parallel session, they talked about air pollution. It started with the lack of data. So we have to install sensors to get data to better understand possible risks. We have distributed media. Anybody could be influencer, a YouTuber. This may result in misinformation. So we have to make sure that risk is communicated in the right way to the right person. And we have to simulate how a communication takes place. As we heard, the knowledge and emotion need to meet. As Kitaro Nishida said, we now have a social SNS trend and information that is given by media. All of these need to match. And to the far right, I wrote about diversity, consolidation, or convergence. There are visible diversities, and we tend to focus on visible diversities. And we recognize those diversities much better, but there are other hidden diversities that are not recognized. When we talk about diverse ideologies, and we have dichotomy in a way. They are simply criticizing each other. But becoming more constructive, take one step further, try to understand the other party, show respect to each other so that you can have constructive dialogue. So that you'll be able to be kind and accept the other diversities that you do not have. And hopefully this change will expand in scale. That's what I'd like to see in 50 years from today.
Thank you very much. We might pass the closing time, but we have some more. Kin-san, please. So about the future in 50 years. This is the theme. And I have a theme of going back to the ideal society. This is my personal story. My theme of graduation thesis, I have to submit it in the end of this week. And the theme is Conviviality, Tools for Conviviality by Ivan Illich. That was written in 1973. That's 50 years ago. Ecological footprint. Wise, this is one Earth's worth of life. So in terms of environmental issues and also disparity between the advanced nations and developing nations. And Illich says that we have to set up the upper limit. And after 50 years, right now, the ecological footprint is 1.7 times the size of the Earth. So that means 1.7. So rather than doing something new, I think we have to return to the ideal. So where do we go back to? I'm doing tea ceremony, so I would like to suggest Japanese culture. I am from Kyoto Prefecture and I'm learning tea ceremony. So you have tatami mat and also you have charcoal. Everything is natural. And depending on the season, the nature changes. And tea ceremony really shows you the nature and also environment and how they are transient. I am not saying that you have to learn tea ceremony, but I suggest that please use teapots to make tea. I went to a tea farm as a volunteer, and they said that people are not using teapots anymore to make tea. So this is my suggestion. Well, this is my idea as a youth, but well, 50 years in the future, everyone is using a teapot to make tea and enjoy tea. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Such a warm story.
Hasegawa-san, please. Thank you. Lastly, I just want to talk about the society that we want to be living in 50 years. There are three perspectives. So 3 things. First, synchronization of individual consciousness and planetary health, and integration of production and consumption, and also overcoming economic rationality. First of all, synchronization of individual consciousness and planetary health. So you yourself and the other party, globe or community, they are separate entities. And we tend to believe that we can be healthy individually. And if you look at economic indicators, we are asking for larger volume, and decisions are made on that principle. Economic indicators are basically selfish, and we tend to focus too much on economic indicators. This resulted in higher environmental burden, but these are actually not considered. Externality has not been considered up to today. So what I'd like to propose is when people to nature and ecological environment, we have to understand that they all belong to the same network. They're all parts of the overall network. We talked about ecological footprint. We only have one planet, and we all belong to this single planet. There is always limitation. There is a limit to carbon that can be emitted. So we have to understand this limitation. With this in mind, each individual will have their share. To a certain extent, we have to live under these limitations and make decisions. When you purchase something, when you eat something, when you travel, the frequency of your mobility, you have to understand the resources that you have right to use. So be aware of limitations. When you have your body health check, there are multiple views necessary. And for Earth as well, there is environmental perspective, social perspective, economical perspective, people's well-being. Multiple perspectives need to be included in the evaluation, just like the individual health check. With regard to the second point, that is the integration of production and consumption, maybe the past way of leading society has solved certain problems. But in that society, we only have one-way street communication between producers and consumers. They were separated. So it's not just producers, providers. Consumers need to be involved because they have a choice to make. In climate measures, there may be climate solutions presented, but consumers need to choose those solutions. So what producers can do, what consumers can do are limited to solve chained problems of climate change and air pollution. So with that understanding, every life service of people, that is production and consumption, they need to be collaboration between them. Producers and consumers are both producers and consumers, prosumers. So this is a new definition. And society and environment need to have sufficient consideration through appropriate choices made by consumers so that we'll be able to establish a society where nobody is left behind. So that will be the common way of building society between producers and consumers. And thirdly, social structural change. What we want to do is to achieve autonomous circulation. We have division of labor. So in one local area, the needs in that area cannot be met internally. So you have to rely on external supply chain, perhaps excessively relying on it, resulting in negative environmental impact. Because we also focus economic indicators, we have wrong disciplines. Unless you have economic conditions met, you will not be able to take appropriate actions. So within a limited local area, limited resources will be utilized and consumed. Although there are limitations within a relatively short physical distance, we have to have small circulation within the area. What you eat is produced by somebody who's living nearby. So physical close distance in the circularity is very important for us to be able to understand what sort of social burden you are creating. So this face-to-face relationship in the community makes us share impression, excitement. It's not just economic rationality that makes you decide something. As a result, we will be able to find right decision-making process. So that is the ideal future that I'd like to see. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, everyone was so ready for these presentations. I'm very sorry that we have very limited time. 5 more minutes we'd like to take about the image of the future world. We have a video I'd like to show you. This is a work style. We don't have to go to the office. We can work from home. That's one. In super aging society, diversity, and also inclusive society, we can use avatars to participate in the social activities, maybe. And also shoes is part of the mobility. Asphalt and concrete, we have the response from them with the magnet. And you can be raised from the floor 10 centimeters and 20 centimeters to move around. So based on our discussions, I'd like to introduce this. But your clothes, the clothes expands when the temperature is lower, or the color changes because of the solar light. And this is another function of the clothes. Health consciousness is very heightened, so we might go to the gym, but the gyms come to you. You're not going to the gym as well. Of course, by movement, you can create energy, and also using this energy from the human body, you can move stuff. And also lighter and also simpler cars. 70 to 80% of the car body should be wood, and also compact cars for 2 or 3 people are going to increase, and also solar panels and also batteries are used for the EVs. So they are all connected to reduce the traffic congestion. Car sharing, route sharing, and sharing economy is going to be prevalent. By connecting, car energy consumption can be reduced.
In far island and coastal area, renewable energy plant can be constructed in this area. So current, wind, solar, various energies can be developed throughout different seasons. This is disaster reduction, water reservoir. So this can be extended to water supply and sewage. You can see drones flying underground. Drone delivery can actually use this underground space. And also, machine will be miniaturized and emission will be reduced, so facilities will become in a dome shape. Transparent organic thin film is utilized on the surface. This is agriculture. Satellite technology will be utilized so that the laser will be utilized to eliminate harmful insects. This is a fun imagination. This is steel making. The furnace can be miniaturized and simplified, and this can become export industry. Labor can be short, maybe smaller. The robot will take place the shortage of labor and resources. This is housing. 3D printing technology can be utilized to create sustainable houses that match different terrains. Wintertime, it's warm. In the summertime, it's very cool inside. Some nations will have to sink under sea because of the global warming. There will be mega solar facility underground. There will be underwater city being built. And this may become a new habitat for marine mammals. Wood durability will be extended. This can be utilized for high-rise building as well. The windows become much larger, and transparent battery can be utilized for that. And there may be water bath that could be placed on the surface of the high-rise buildings. Sorry that we exceeded our time. 120 years ago, in 1901, Hochi newspaper reported the forecast of 20th century. Subway, internet, SNS, and with the communication-related technologies and internet shoppings, many of these forecasts have been realized. So I believe that we humans will be able to realize our dreams. Climate change, water, biodiversity, sustainable production and consumption in every areas. We have taken integrated approach so that we can build ideal society in the future. This is a major just transition necessary in a society. Our wishes or dreams, we wanted to share those dreams here in a seminar like this. I'd like to ask you to give another warm round of applause to the panelists and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you very much for the panelists. With this, we'd like to close the closing session. With this, we'd like to close the 15th ISAP Forum 2023. All the programs are completed. Once again, thank you very much for participating in the sessions. Thank you.